Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. It is morning somewhere. It's morning. It's morning as long as I declare that it's morning. This is the best, the number one, the top, the elite afternoon morning show on the internet that is gradually working its way into an evening morning show. Yeah, I guess it depends on where you are in the country, right? So shout out to my West Coast brethren. It's solidly afternoon where you guys are. It's wandering its way in toward evening where I am out on the East Coast. I still contend that it's like late afternoon goes until, I don't know, like 6 p.m. Evening starts at 6 p.m. That's my opinion. Late afternoon. Early afternoon is noon. Noon to 2. Mid-afternoon is 2 to 6. And then, late afternoon is like 2, or mid-afternoon be 2 to 5, and then late afternoon is like 5 to 6. That's my I've declared it to be so. And as the curator of the ASTROLABE, I am the only one who's qualified to declare when these different times what the constraints are on these different times. Ford says 5. He says 6 is too generous, especially in winter. Well, see, that is implicitly presuming the legitimacy of daylight saving time, and I refuse to do that. It is it's just a matter of time, I think, until it actually gets completely just done away with altogether. But I think we need to begin acting as if it is so. Anyways, I've got a whole bunch of stuff for you guys here today. A whole bunch of very good stuff. I have listened to so many good podcasts in the last few days. I built up a backlog, and I had to go catch up on a bunch of things. And there's some really, really good stuff out there. I'm going to get to, let's see, some stuff from a couple of them today. One of them will be, I've got a clip from Peter Thiel. He had a very interesting part 1 of an interview series he's going to be doing with the Hoover Institute. So I've got a clip from that and breakdown of some of the stuff that he was talking about there. I'm going to read later on toward the end of the show here. I'm going to read through a post from Alex Craner that he posted in, I think it was in August. And okay, well, I got to back up here a little bit. So first of all, the curmudgeon off has occurred. The two mustachioed goat fathers have curmudgeoned off on the internet for us. I got an advance viewing, I suppose you would say, of the conversation between Tom Luongo and Jason Miranchuk, and let me tell you, folks, it is better than you're expecting. It is very, very good. It's going to be like it's like a seminal show that we're going to have to refer back to over and over again, because Tom, with Jason contributing, they lay the whole story out really clearly and concisely in a single episode. A lot of the different things we've been talking about regarding the development of the Eurodollar system and the evolution, like the different crises that we've had over the last couple of decades, and what the mainstream story about them has been, and the narrative that casts, and then what the actual underlying reality has been, and the narrative that casts. So there's been bits and pieces of it. Stormy's gotten into a lot of it in some places. Tom's gotten into a lot of it in other places. Pete and Jason and I, we've talked about various different aspects of it in a lot of places, but laying it out in straight succession the way that Tom did on that show is just, it's so good. And it's like they got through all the backstory, kind of like it's like the setup for the main event, and they just got to it right at the end of the conversation. So I can't wait for part 2. I don't know where all it's available right now. I do know that if you go to Jason's Gumroad, it's Tales of the Shadow Empire. If you look up Jason Miranchuk, Mironchuck on Gumroad, then you should find it there. I think it's like $40 or something like that. But if you pay for it, then you get access to a Telegram channel that gives you continual access to all the new stuff in the series that he produces going forward. So it's 100% worthwhile. I know that he dropped it in the Telegram this morning because I'm in there. So that's one way you can go get it. I don't know if he's posted it up on the channel yet or not, but you guys should go listen to that as soon as possible. And that led me to going back and listening to Tom Luongo talking to Alex Craner back in, I think it was like the same time, like end of August, I believe. And all fuses lead to London. And oh man, is this is this ever some like spicy stuff? Like we're getting right down to the nuts and bolts of the actual mechanics of what's happening right now, and it's as bare as you could possibly imagine. There's the entire scam that is the Ukraine war and the connections that it has to the Israel-Gaza war and the city of London and like all of this is not speculative anymore. The whole Tom Luongo, we'll just call it the Tom Luongo theory that implicates the city of London, like that is not speculative. It's very, very obviously true. And the implications that has for the incoming MAGA administration and looking at what their priorities are and how they align and to what extent this is a direct, open conflict between different elites with different agendas and to what extent it's just becoming that just as a natural outflow of incentives is like this is the story of 2025. 2025 will be dominated by this whole story. There's just no way around it. So this is a good place to come for some of that conversation. Really, you're going to want to keep up with anything that Pete Quinones is putting out, anything that Jason is putting out. I'll be touching on it at various points here. We have, you guys have heard about this secret radio transmission we have that may or may not be turning into a 24/7 radio for our guys. You'll be hearing about updates on that. Another person who's not directly implicated necessarily, but who I think is very much worth watching right now is Michael Saylor. What he's talking about with Bitcoin, aligning these stories together just will make your mind melt. And then obviously Peter Thiel is very important. Listening to the things he's focused on and knowing the connections that he has. This is kind of the broad swath of characters that are developing, that are exploring through this story. So Alex Craner, there's a long way to say Alex Craner wrote a really interesting blog post about some things he uncovered between activities between the United Kingdom and Ukraine regarding it's stuff that happened just before the Kursk offensive. So I'm going to read through that whole blog post. It's totally worth it. We'll get to that in a little bit later toward the end. I've got some bad news. I've got some dark stories, stories that are going to light a fire in your belly. And then I've got some entertaining stuff. We're going to talk about the vibe shift, the Trump dance, which I think I saw someone here in the chat said, let's see, Frankenstein says, got to get a better name than for the Trump than Trump shimmy for the Trump dance. And I think the name is the Trump dance. Like, I think that's the name. If you say the Trump dance, everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to explain it. Like once upon a time, this might have been like a sort of a niche Twitter thing. You have to be like, oh yeah, you know the dance that he does. No, not anymore. Like it has absolutely taken over. So I've got some videos related to that as well. Do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I was just looking at, let me pull up the screenshot that I took. I was looking at some of the analytics on the channel while I was getting the show set up. Watch time from subscribers over the last 28 days, 81.7%. So over 3 out of 4 of you guys watching are already subscribed, which is great. These are fantastic numbers. But what it means is we need more non-subscribers watching this. We need to get this stuff in front of more non-subscribers. I'm doing everything I can. I bear some of that burden. You guys also can share in that burden. You guys can share clips or post it out or tell people about it, and that'll help grow the channel. The other interesting number here is the male-female breakdown over the past 28 days. 99.3% male. So it is a sausage fest up in here. And that's fine. Like this isn't intended to cater toward women. And it's funny that there's like 5. There's like 5 women. I think almost all of them are in the King Pill Discord. And then you see them in the chat here occasionally. Now, I guess there may be some lurkers out there. There may be some that I don't know about. But I think it's funny. It's at 99.3. We got, if you guys are longtime followers of the show, you might remember about a year ago, maybe 10 to 12 months ago, when Cooper and I were doing shows together really regularly, we were talking about masculinity and femininity, and this led us into like the generations and generational cycles, and that has led to the PayPal mafia and so on. But back at that time, we actually got to where I think it peaked out at like 77% male, 23% female. We are actually drawing in the ladies. the ladies were tuning in. And then Cooper dropped off the show and they all went. No. What it actually perfectly corresponds to, this is an interesting little psychological note. It perfectly corresponds to when we were publishing shorts on the channel. So those numbers, the male female breakdown in the viewers, that covers all content on the platform. So there was a brief stretch there where we were posting shorts, and you can see all of the metrics were all like totally goosed while we were posting shorts. Our impressions were way higher. Our subscriber rate was way higher. Our views, total views, were way higher, and I'm talking like 5 to 10x, way higher. So for those of you, if you're out there trying to grow a show or grow a platform or something like that, if you want to just goose your numbers, then shorts are the way to do it. Now, what's very evident in this is that the shorts viewership is vastly more female than the long form viewership. There's something about the shorts that women come over to YouTube, and it's probably because they're on Instagram or TikTok, and then they come over to YouTube, and so the thing that they're drawn toward on the YouTube platform is the shorts. So they sit there and they scroll through the shorts. So yeah, I guess for you marketing bros or sales bros or whatever, or people who just find this sort of thing interesting, this is overwhelming evidence that shorts viewership is probably 50-50 male female, and then the long form stuff is probably like 85-15 male. Biblical Anarchy says, you're making a great argument for why shorts need to be removed. Well, yes, eventually we're going to start getting our social media platforms that are just de facto segregated. There's been attempts at making that in the past, but I think the trajectory we're on, men are going to get their male spaces back. There's an inevitability to that even the craftiest social engineers can't stand against. Okay. Let's jump in here. We got to start off with a little bit of slop, of course. And the slop is the stuff that's the easiest to find. So I have an overwhelming abundance of it. So it's hard for me to just take a day and do no slop because it's gonna back up too much. And the reason that I include this slop is, number one, I think you can notice trends, you can observe various different trends in the type of slop that's there. So it's sort of like looking at the psychology of the normie. And then there's a lot of utility in slop, just in its creation, just as simple, fun entertainment. This one here is mostly just simple, fun entertainment. If Mr. Brightside was a folk song.
Coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want it all. Started out as a kiss, how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss, it was only a kiss. Now I'm falling asleep, it's just calling a cab. While he's having a smoke, it's just taking a drag. Now they're going to bed, and my stomach is sick. And it's all in my head, but she's touching his chest. Now he takes off her dress. Now let me go. I just can't look, it's killing me and taking control. Jealousy, turning states into the sea, swimming through sick lullabies, choking on your alibis. But that's just the price I pay. Destiny is calling me. Open up my eager eyes. I'm Mr. Brightside. Yeah, I'm Mr. Brightside. I'm Mr. Brightside.
That is good stuff. This is such a fascinating. Someone said here in the chat, this is white culture, capital H white culture. Said Straight Buster, it's white culture. It is so distinctly white. And I love this because I love to consume this because if I could create it, I would. I have no idea how to do this sort of thing. I can perform something someone else creates for me. I play the cello. I sang in choir. You know, I've been in the whole music world and I love it, but I have no natural instinct for it. I can learn it, but I have no natural instinct for it, and it is absolutely fascinating to me. So having the idea, hey, let's do a folk cover of Mr. Brightside, is one thing. Like oh shit, that sounds like a really cool idea, and then to pull it off is, yeah, hats off to these guys. All right, it's a little more slop here. I cannot get enough of watching these like Startle prank videos and the reactions to them, especially when the person, you know, like scares a fart out of them or they genuinely like lose their balance and fall down. Endlessly entertaining.
That's what I'm gonna do when someone tries to scare me. I'm gonna. Ah!
Sangue de Deus! Tô aqui!
Oh, that's one of the best ones right there. The little face she made. Ah! That kid is lucky. That kid's lucky it's still alive. Big like situational awareness moment for mom there, not absolutely punting that kid into next week. You
No! Stop! Hey!
Okay. On to something real serious. Brian Romelli is a great follow. He says, in my VHS archaeology, we enter some strata that just seems a bit out of place. In this specimen, late night 1992 commercial, we find the bear in a new habitat. Operators are standing by, just don't call the toll-free number.
Does the shoulder strap in your car cut into your shoulder? When you travel, is your shoulder strap too tight and annoying? Introducing the Titty Bear. That's T-I-D-D-Y Bear, the cute little guy that eliminates all those irritating shoulder strap problems. Designed to make driving more comfortable, the Titty Bear snaps onto your shoulder strap and moves up and down to eliminate uncomfortable pressure wherever you need it.
My shoulder strap used to pull so tight I could hardly breathe. Now with the Titty Bear, I really enjoy traveling again.
With a patent-pending swivel design, you can easily adjust the Titty Bear to work from either the driver's side, passenger seat, or infant car seat. And it fits on all makes and models. Just snap it on, slide it to where it relieves the pressure, and you're ready for a comfortable ride. The Titty Bear stays where you want it until you move it, and it's easy to slide out of the way when not in use. The cuddly Titty Bear is filled with soft, cushy beads, so it snuggles comfortably to your needs. Place it here, or anywhere you need to keep those irritating straps from digging in.
My shoulder strap was always...
We used to live in a proper country, man.
It makes it comfortable for me to drive again.
The cuddly Titty Bear is so comfortable and convenient to use, your whole family will love it. Now you can have your own Titty Bear and eliminate those annoying shoulder strap pains. Call and order your Titty Bear right now.
I identify as Titty Bear. This is also white culture. And yes, this is actually real. If you follow Brian Romelli, he actually has like a huge backlog of VHS tapes or something like that he's going through and digitizing and coming across all sorts of just fascinating things. We used to This isn't even that long ago. It was this 1992, so 30 years ago. This isn't that long ago. Totally different world. Just completely different. This is a real product. All right, so we talked about the dance. The dance has taken over no matter where they go. The libs can't get away from it. We're celebrating and they're holding themselves up in their blue cry echo chamber. Feels good, man. This was made by a good friend. And the good friend did not want to be identified, but he's been skeptical of the vibe shift, but even he's getting pulled along. He's making hype videos now. Shout out to the friend. There's a few of you who know who he is. So I have to say here before we really get going on it, this here, culturally, this is very significant. If you are an American soccer fan, you know how absolutely insufferably insane the shit libs who populate a lot of American soccer fandom are. These are like the most deranged end of the spectrum. Anti-Trumpism is most viscerally felt among the shit libs who follow American soccer. And having Christian Pulisic, who's basically the generally accepted best player on the team, going and doing the Trump dance is genuinely that he felt safe enough to do that he felt he could do that and not like it was a scandal worth creating because it would be easy to weather. That's a profound sense of where the culture is at right now. So even if you don't sports ball, I'm telling you, this is a huge indicator, along with a bunch of the other clips that are in this. Now, okay, I'll just let it play. That's such a banger. Now, I played enough of that song consecutively that there's a good chance that YouTube winds up pulling it down. I was actually kind of waiting to see if it would happen midstream. So if you're listening to the replay later on and if for whatever reason I had to pull it out or something like that, then you can go to kingpill.substack.com and you can see the tweet itself. I tweeted it out. Or if you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the master thread that's in the podcast notes. 5 leaf bucks from QWERTY-ZZ7, a loyalist. He says 20% of the women are actually my alt account. Well, thank you, very much appreciated. I I'll take any fake numbers that I can get. And then $5 from Samoa Bob. He says, for context, they tried to cancel Pulisic like 4 to 5 years ago because he liked a U.S. men's national team's trainer's post that had a MAGA hat on a desk. Yes, this is like epitomizes the shit libs in U.S. soccer fans. So like not all U.S. soccer fans are like that. There's actually a ton that are not like that. But it's like a microcosm of the rest of society where all the ones who are not like that just kind of just allow it to, there's like whatever, just try to keep it from getting on us as much as possible. And so it's like this small, super vocal minority. So having him come out and actually do the Trump dance I saw some very anguished posts yesterday. And it's just give me all the tears. Let me slurp them all up. Biblical Anarchy says, I'm literally crying right now. We need a right-wing version of Greta going, how dare you? You've stolen my childhood. Yeah. John says the amount of narrative shattering in this video is incredible. The stuff lib meltdowns are made of. Yeah, and they're all going over to Blue Cry to cry about it. And what's funny is all of a sudden they're going over there to start crying about all this stuff and getting banned and suspended for posting cheese pizza and for election denying. There's people who came back to Twitter and they were posting, complaining about the fact that they were saying Elon stole the election for Trump by like zapping votes out into satellites and that the election wasn't legitimate, and Blue Sky is banning them for it. And they come back over to Twitter and they're like, I can't believe they're suppressing this. It's so delicious. I think someone replied here. Yeah. Techno Maoist, what a name. Says, no joke, I think the dance is keeping Trump alive. Historically, a regime would do what it always does in this situation, but they're scared because the dance is signaling total cultural victory, and they can't rely on their normal foot soldiers if things went sideways. I say this is exactly it. The groundswell of the phenomenon of the dance is a comprehensive repudiation of all of the regime's scare tactics of the past decade. Having all these having both popular people and normal people feeling comfortable to just do it in public, and then everyone just kind of laughs and has a good time. And there's even when someone does it, there's sort of that split second of like, oh, he's doing it. And everyone kind of looks at each other and they're like, yeah, he's doing it. Yeah, let's go. Okay, cool. We're not going to freak out about it. And that in itself has like an uplifting effect. So it's become absolutely contagious. And every single time someone does it, it's a direct repudiation of all of the scaremongering, which means the regime's propaganda machine is broken. It doesn't work. They're still going to use it. They're going to keep using it. It's going to keep spitting stuff out. But that's a good thing. Every time we see them pumping out more propaganda, it's a further revelation of who they are. And you point to it and you say, see, look, there's more. I'm constantly being proven right every single day. The existence of regime propaganda is a white pill because the propaganda machine has been broken and they're still using it to whatever extent they can. They're even starting to back off on it a lot. Here's we got to get the actual song. We got to get the actual song. And this whole moment with John Jones was really cool.
I also want to say a big thank you to President Donald Trump for being here tonight. Can I get
a It's so good. This is like this is the anthem of the new golden age. There's no need to feel down. Revenant says, in my view, Trump being accepted by normies is unambiguously a good thing. It means that the average person isn't afraid of Trump's message anymore. 8 years of media narrative has been eroded and undermined in one short year. The various podcast appearances were probably a significant factor in this. Until this year, the average person had only heard Trump filtered through selectively edited and dishonest media reporting. The criticism I keep hearing as to why it's bad include Trump is too pro-Israel, which isn't compelling because the entire American government is pro-Israel anyway. Other silly claims include Trump will start a war with Iran, baseless and absurd on its face, or Trump will start a war with China. U.S. is simply not capable of this regardless of who's president. If the choice is between a pro-Israel government that enforces immigration law and a pro-Israel government that doesn't, it's a really, really easy choice. Bonus points if his admin actually undermines the federal bureaucracy Trump has declared his intention to do. Basically, the worst case scenario is that we don't get anything any better than the alternatives to Trump, but it's much more likely that we at least get something out of the ordinary. And then a little memeing. Trump is controlled by Jews! But don't you guys say all the other politicians are controlled by Jews? Yeah! But Trump is the only one who ran on deporting people and closing the border. Jew! You're a Jew! Yeah, his Groyper's in shambles. And then Vagrant... Shout out to the powerful mutual. He said Trump has single-handedly destroyed the left's cultural mandate at the height of their power with every institution under their control. Smashed to atoms. This isn't just a vibe shift, it's a complete reversal of where we were 8 years ago. Hard to explain how big of a deal this is. I'm not kidding. I was up almost all night, the night before last, and at like 5 o'clock in the morning, as it was starting to get light out, I was like, I want to listen to the fucking YMCA song. I went out and I was going for a walk, and I turned on the freaking YMCA song because it got me walking with a pep in my step. I was like, yeah, hell yeah, man. The day is beginning. It's like the ultimate, I don't know, put a pep in your step anthem for the start of the day. High-powered, five Eagle Bucks says, thoughts of blue anon election stealing conspiracy theories harming the Dems worse than what QAnon did to certain parts of the right. I don't think it's going to be quite that way. It's funny you mentioned QAnon because I need to figure out how to start talking about this. Because there's I told you guys that we watched this thing for the Schizo stream last week on the start of the QAnon phenomenon. And rewatching that now after 4 years, I'm reminded of just how much of my whole progression on it was like, oh, this is silly, like boomer slop. I love me a good conspiracy theory, and it's fun to read the stuff like lizard people or Hollow Earth or like some of these things like whatever. It's what does Scott Adams calls it? He calls it like, I think, a recreational belief. Like, yeah, I'll believe this for the fun of it. I'm not gonna. I have no obligation to prove it all. It's just kind of fun to believe and just kind of play with the idea. And so that's kind of how I looked at it. And then I saw this documentary that really goes through and delineates all of the various proofs. And you can't watch it and come away with concluding, like, the very least thing that you can conclude is that there was a person who was close to Trump, like physically in proximity close to Trump on a regular basis, who was explicitly coordinating things with Trump. There's no way to conclude anything other than that. So President Trump knows what QAnon is and was involved in it from the very beginning to some very detailed degree, regardless of what it actually is. You can't come away from it. That's like the bare minimum thing you can come away from it with. So now, what it created was this citizen journalists thing, which amounts to, at certain levels, people who are genuinely doing, like Tom Luongo is effectively is a citizen journalist. That style of thing was absolutely goosed by the whole QAnon phenomenon. It also is like crazy boomer lady with a Twitter account who sees the world in cartoonish terms and is figuring out a way to lever every possible conspiracy theory interpretation imaginable into it. But those are not the same thing. All of the silly boomer tard Q stuff is obviously goofy. But there's something that's very, very real in the middle of that. That there was military intelligence and people who were close to the Trump camp from the very beginning. Even like the possibility that Trump was recruited. He was approached by people who were not aligned with the regime and were inducing him to run, and so they could support him and they could start taking an angle at some of these different things. And in retrospect now, looking at what has happened in the business world and with particularly the Jerome Powell, Jamie Dimon thing that Tom Luongo and Jason talk about in the episode that'll drop shortly, like, it's now very obvious that there have been powerful people who have been building up and coordinating to a greater or lesser degree behind the scenes, angling for a regime change operation. So I think the Q people are going to some degree, they're going to actually wind up getting, like, we're going to come full circle on the Q people, and they're going to wind up being a lot more validated than maybe people would have thought they were, because Q has become like the archetypal conspiratard thing that no serious person would ever pay a lick of mind to. Even I have a hesitation about talking about it. Once I get talking about it, it's easier to say, whatever, just go balls deep. But even I'm like, do I really want to say that? Everyone's going to be, oh, you're cute. But at this point, I'm like, fuck it. Go watch this documentary and tell me you don't come away from it being like, there's something going on here. And that something didn't just go away. Like, I know Q is still posting. I haven't paid any attention. I don't know if I've ever read an actual Q drop. Like, I've never gone and like actually experienced it. I've just listened to what other people are saying about it. Where was I going with that? The super chat here. So will it harm the Dems worse than what QAnon did to certain parts of the right? Now, okay, so the effect of QAnon was absolutely co-opted to some degree, and narrative. There was a narrative that was formed around it intentionally by the media. But the fact that the media did that even lends more legitimacy to it, because you could say, oh, they just were looking for anything and this works to harm them. Well, you could say that, I suppose. But it's also interesting that the effect of the QAnon phenomenon was that it sparked a massive legitimate research and citizen journalist project that spiraled off in a bunch of different directions and contributed to the formation of a lot of the theories that dominate the so-called counter-elite or dissident perspective to the regime. Many of those theories, like the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, that was very prominent among the Q world long before it actually hit the mainstream. So that was a big thing that they were diving into. And there's so many things that spiral off from it that have become more and more normalized and mainstreamed, and Q was the vector for a lot of that. So the media absolutely capitalized on it, but it looks pretty clear to me that the media was capitalizing on it specifically because it was airing their dirty laundry. And they needed to capitalize on it and try to counter narrative because they had to stay in control of the story. And if they didn't counter it, it wasn't just like, oh, this weird thing will exist out there and it doesn't mean anything. No, if it was left to just exist out there, it was going to gain more and more purchase on the American mind. So it had to be counter-signaled. $25 from Minoan. Thank you, man. It says, you're a big contributor to the positive vibe shift. Appreciating all you do. Go get them. Thank you, man. Very much appreciated. The documentary is, so I downloaded it. It was on YouTube 4 years ago or something, and I was like, yeah, this is not going to last long. So I downloaded it. I'll drop it in the Telegram. I'm trying to decide if I want to just tweet it out. It's like 2 hours long. I might just tweet it out. I'll for sure drop it in the Telegram channel because people have asked for it, and it'll be an easy way to find it. But I might just tweet it out after the show. If you want to get the access to the Telegram channel, then just join the Kingpill Discord. The link to the Telegram is in the Discord, and you go to kingpill.com to do that. All right, so as an indicator of this vibe shift, A new poll finds high optimism for America when Donald Trump assumes office in 2025. How likely that the U.S. will head in a better direction in 2025? 58% of people say very or somewhat likely. 38% of people say not very or not at all likely. This is way bigger numbers than I would have anticipated. I would expect it to be much more 50-50. This is a fairly predominant majority. So people are this indicates people didn't just vote for Trump, like hold their nose and just vote for him and now just kind of, hunker down and wait for the explosions. They're actually feeling gratified in voting for him. They're like, actually, I'm glad I voted for him. And actually, I think some good stuff's going to happen because of this. So the narrative is completely out of containment. They have no control over it anymore. As you can see with things like this next story, the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe said they met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago on Friday for the first time in 7 years and agreed to reopen lines of communication despite disagreements on many issues. These are two of the most craven, disingenuous, corrupt, absolutely for sale partisan hacks out there. But here's the thing. These are the ones who are going to turn first. Because if you're a grifter, if you are like Cuomo, Chris Cuomo, if you're one of these people who's just in it for popularity and status and prestige, then those people actually have a much keener sense for the winds of change. Because that's the thing that they're most tuned into. So when the grifters start grifting in your direction, that's a good sign. That means everything is moving your way. Now, it's a good sign to you if you're someone who's positioned to take advantage of it and capitalize on it, and you're psychologically prepared for that. You have the spiritual posture of, it's my responsibility to build the world that I want to live in and not just sit around and ask someone else to do it. If you're spiritually focused or attuned to the idea that you just want someone to fix all the problems so that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, well, then, maybe it's not quite as good of a sign because, you're going to project your consciousness on other people and you're going to say, oh, well, that just means the grifters are just going to take it over and control it and run it. And there's, so they're just going to do the thing cynically. No. They'll take it over and they'll run it if where you're concerned, you're just going to be along for the ride. But if you're someone who's ready to actually step up to the plate and begin taking control of your own culture, then it's a very, very good sign. It means that you're swimming less and less upstream. Now, the thing about swimming upstream is that if you always swam downstream, you wouldn't be able to swim upstream. You would lose that ability. Swimming upstream is the thing that hones your ability to swim upstream. So if you want to be able to resist the flow at all, you have to be able to swim upstream. But the instinct I think naturally as a human, the instinct is as soon as the stream starts taking you somewhere you might want to go, then you let up and you stop swimming against it because it's taking you where you want to go. But then you lose the ability to swim against it. So as soon as the stream starts turning with you, just don't let up. Just because you start pushing on doors and finding open doors doesn't mean you just stop pushing. I think this is one of the biggest risks with Trump coming into power is people just letting up because there's nothing to push against anymore. Over the last decade plus, it's felt like we're just constantly having to just be all braced up and pushing against this door, whether trying to hold it shut or trying to hold it open or we're trying to push it open, just leaned up against it. And then all of a sudden, if it just goes away, then you're kind of like, oh, what do we do now? It was easy for us to all coordinate and focus on pushing against this thing. But that thing opens. Okay, you step in the room, I step in the room. Do we go this way or that way? Or we look, what's happening here? And so then you can lose momentum because you're winning. So the key here is just because we're winning doesn't mean we stop pushing. I'm not going to play you this whole 2.5 minute thing of Joe and Mika. They're insufferable, but they just talk about how they went there and they talked to him and they had a meeting and they've agreed that actually we need to kind of work things out and we need to be more honest and yada 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 whatever. So they posted that and all the libs threw a shit fit publicly, had a complete cow, and then here's this clip from this morning, right? Yeah. So Joe Scarborough says he received calls all day from around the world supportive of his meeting with President-elect Trump despite online backlash.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, to everybody who was so kind last night, but also thank you. Willie, yesterday I saw for the first time what a massive disconnect there was between social media and the real world, because we were flooded with phone calls from people all day, literally around the world. Very positive, very supportive, going, I understand what you do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But once in a while I would get a text or a call from someone and go, oh man, I hope you're doing okay. And I call him back and I go, well, Eddie Glad was one of them. I go, Eddie, are you on Twitter? And he goes, I am. I go, okay, well, I'm not. So we've had a good day. Mika just had a wonderful event. It is fantastic. We're going to do all of us are going to do the best we can do, and we're all working towards a better America.
Take it day by day.
Day by day. And again, you can predict the future by shaping the future. But the reason I wanted to talk about that 1/4 of Americans voted for Donald Trump, about 1/4 voted for Kamala Harris is there's another election in 2 years. Now, I don't care who wins and how big they win. We've seen time and again, and we talk about it. Americans go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with their picks. If Republicans, if Donald Trump, if
she is absolutely seething.
If Republican senators put in as an attorney general somebody that 3 women have testified, I believe, if I'm correct. He had sex with an underage woman at a drug-fueled party. And what I read in the Wall Street Journal was he paid 2 other women for sex. If that is something that Republican senators and Donald Trump are okay with, there will be consequences at the voting booth 2 years from now. And of course, we always say, oh, we won. Oh, we won. We can do whatever we want. Really? Because that's what I heard a lot of Democrats saying after Barack Obama won. And 2 years later, the Tea Party came roaring into town. So I will say it again. This and other of these picks, Republicans would be smart to advise and consent. And Donald Trump would be smart to back off of them in 2 or 3 of these cases, because there are elections 2 years from now and things just won't go well.
It is some absolutely epic cope. And you can tell that, like, the way he's talking about it, trying to piece his words together, he's just like memorizing, he's like reciting memorized lines and just trying to sort of convince himself of it as he's talking about it. There's no heart in it. But listen subliminally to what the messaging is here. It sounds like Republicans in, like, after Obama was elected. Well, you know what? You got to remember there are there are midterms. There's going to be another election. So maybe you should do a lot of what you want, but just back off the crazy stuff. Do a lot. You won. That's right. Do the things you're going to do, but don't get too crazy with it. Just kind of rein it in just a little bit, because remember, the voters are going to hold you accountable. It is absolute submission, complete defeat, total relegation to outer party status. And this is from MSNBC. They're absolutely gutted, devastated. Recognize absolutely that their only future is if they kiss the ring. And, of course, the lovely Megyn Kelly had the perfect response to them.
This morning, it's the dawn of a new day, Glenn. Let's watch.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago
to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years. What we did agree on was to restart communications. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues.
It's time for a new approach. And we're not here to defend or normalize Donald Trump. We're here to report on him.
I searched for a way to respond appropriately, and I called on my 10 years as a litigator in addition to my now 20 as a journalist, and I think I found the perfect phrase, go fuck yourselves. This morning.
She's great. So we've watched some Scott Jennings clips in the past, and I've got a couple more bangers for you. The reason I want to focus on this guy is because I think the way this is shaping up now, he is the guy to watch. Scott Jennings is he's like the vanguard. He's the token conservative on the liberal networks, and the extent to which he pushes is we can see it as sort of like a flying cover for what Trump wants to do. And the minute he starts counter-signaling, the minute he starts getting wishy-washy and squishy on it, that's when we'll know that someone's breaking ranks. A new message has come down from on high. Someone's breaking with the trajectory. There's some line has been crossed. I think Scott Jennings is a guy to just follow. Listen to him. I have no idea if he's sincere. I don't know anything about him except for what I've seen of him on CNN. He's absolutely auditioning for something, and he's becoming pretty significant. The way that his clips are going around and the way people are getting like spazzing the fuck out about him. There's a trend that's developing here, and I think it's worth watching and studying the way that people respond to him and just how much he goes out of his way to avoid counter-signaling Trump.
Some of this. And think about this. The challenge of sorting through them is mammoth. We had a hard time doing it in Iraq. Okay, our troops have had a hard time doing it in Afghanistan. Trying to ask them to sort through who's who and implement a policy like this, here in the United States is like nothing we've ever seen. Actually, I mean, hold on, maybe the only precedent we have is internment camps during World War II against Japanese Americans, but there's not a military precedent for sorting through who on the Upper East Side is illegal and who's not. And you're asking a 19-year-old, right, holding a weapon, who signed up to serve his or her country, to thrust themselves into maybe the most fraught political topic that we've got in this country. People want a solution, but they don't necessarily want that one.
You've twice now insinuated that Trump's going to send the military to round up American citizens, which is totally false. There are 1.3 to 1.6 million illegal immigrants in this country today who have already received deportation orders from a court. You can start there. There's another population, as Mark said, that have either committed violent crimes in the United States or committed violent crimes where they came from. You can also do that. That has nothing to do with the people in your neighborhood, has nothing to do with the person in your office, and has nothing to do with whatever the hell you're talking about. It has to do with getting people out of the country who do not belong.
How are you going to deploy the military? Give me how exactly.
Getting people out of the country who do not belong. That phrase by itself is like, if you say that around a middle-aged, upper-class white woman, she will have a fucking stroke. So, like, CNN's core demographic hearing that is extreme.
You would deploy an active duty military unit to respond to this crisis?
I would use the military in conjunction with local officials,
what does that look
local
like?
Law enforcement, county sheriffs, people who know their communities, because I assume a lot of the local sheriffs and jailers are going to be the people who end up housing some of these folks before they are deported. But there has to be some
purpose. What's the mission for that young private? What is he actually going to be tasked to guard a gate, or is he going to be investigating?
I don't know. I wasn't elected.
But you're sitting here on CNN saying we should do it. I think you should think out a little bit more about what they actually should be required to do. It sounds real good.
One at a time. Scott, there are millions of people who came into the country illegally, who have already received deportation orders, or who have committed some other crime while they've been here. The fact that you want to leave them in place is mind-boggling.
That is not what I said. That is not what I said.
Let me ask the same question I asked Chuck. Yeah. What was the mandate from the election? As much as any issue, immigration was on the ballot. So what do you think the voters were saying on immigration?
I think the voters were saying, do something about it. I think broadly, across partisan lines, there's almost universal need for people to do something about it. What you do about it is a totally different story. Can I finish? Or are you guys going to jump in? I know this is like the normal thing around.
This guy's an absolute cuck. But again, this is complete submission. Yes. Do something. Just don't do that, please. Don't do that. We'll punish you if you do that. You better not. you better think twice. Pure cope and just negotiating with the inevitable. Here's another Scott Jennings clip.
I'm amazed. I did not expect Hitler to get so many meeting requests. First from Joe Biden, now from Mika and Joe. It's amazing that literal Hitler is getting all these meeting requests. And what it tells me, Professor, is that all the rhetoric that came from the left, from the Democrats, from the White House, from Kamala Harris and everyone else before the election, all of the rhetoric, the fascism, the Hitler, the Nazi rally at him, it was all a bunch of BS. They didn't mean any of it. And if I were in the Democrat sort of rabble's shoes, I would be looking at all my leaders and going, did you just BS me for an entire 6 weeks before the election?
I just reread.
I'm amazed.
Scott Jennings, we will be following your career earnestly. New York Times commenters are now revolting en masse against the commentariat and spouting dangerous great replacement rhetoric. Incredible. Now, for what it's worth, the comments are spurging out. This is satire, or this is like total sarcasm. These are comments. I'm going to read through these. These are comments from the New York Times. The French are replaced with other countries' inhabitants from cultures greatly different from their own. Is it really France anymore? Ditto Germany, the Netherlands, England, Italy. That's what Europe is facing. It's existential to national identity and way of life on a basic level. Why wouldn't Europeans be alarmed? The article states that many governments failed to integrate immigrants effectively. The article should have also mentioned that many immigrants simply neither wish nor try to integrate, seeking instead to impose their own beliefs, for example, on women's rights or the primacy of religious laws over secular law. We're going to get lib support for mass deportations on the basis that the immigrants that have been brought in illegally aren't going to be sufficiently liberal. Anyone who does not rank this challenge at the top of the list of reasons for the growing anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe refuses to acknowledge observable reality. Remember, this is on the New York Times comment section. Extremist parties are a symptom, not a cause. For decades, legitimate debate over the cost of immigration, be it economic, social, or cultural, have been forcibly shut down by labeling it as this article does, extremist. It didn't solve the problem. It merely created a pressure cooker environment where discussion of things like rape, no-go zones, Islam, or failure to economically integrate was shut down by shrill cries of racism and Islamophobia. What did the protected, ensconced leadership elites of Europe think was going to happen? By refusing to address the downsides of mass immigration, they have only served to make it ever more popular. This wasn't hard to see except for the willfully blind. And last one, what I just said about them being insufficiently lib, why they're going to be deported. Why is all blame placed on governments for failing to integrate masses of newcomers? What about the newcomers? They come most often from cultures utterly incompatible with Western European liberal values. Deeply religious, hostile to women's rights, hostile to LGBT rights, hostile to atheism. They build insular communities and refuse to integrate. Societal cohesion erodes, crime spikes, the social safety net starts to fray, and seemingly all for no benefit. Native populations are understandably frustrated. Do you realize just how far the pendulum is swinging? Mass deportations are happening in the United States. The culture is so ready for it and so behind it. You want further evidence? This is from Justin Trudeau.
Immigration. Let's talk about it. In the last 2 years, our population has grown really fast, like baby boom fast. And increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests. So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years. Today, I'm going to let you in on what happened, where we made some mistakes, and why we're taking this big turn.
Pure, millennial slop vibe. Justin Trudeau is making the largest cut to immigration in Canada in roughly 100 years. Now, if you have autism, you're going to complain that the reason that they're doing it is because the big, bad, rich people are harming the poor immigrants. Who gives a shit why they're doing it? They're doing it. You want less immigration? You want deportations? This is how it happens. Take the frickin' win when you get it and stop fucking blackpilling. Old Cenk, the radicalization of the Young Turks has been fun to watch. Cenk says, hey, at Elon Musk, put me in charge of the Pentagon. I'll slash $400 billion easy. That'll get you 20% to your goal of $2 trillion right out of the gate. I went to Wharton 3 years before you. I own a media company, so I know how to run a business. If you really want to cut, put me in, coach. And Elon replies, specific suggestions are welcome. And Cenk says, as you know, you need to see the line items in the budget, but I have one suggestion already. The generals are not allowed to get a job with defense contractors for 10 years. They authorize so much wasteful spending because they're going to get hired by those same companies. Now, that was yesterday, and I went and opened the, oh no, here it is, yeah. Today, Cenk says, I asked Elon Musk to put me in charge of cutting the Pentagon, and he said, what are your suggestions? I run the largest left-wing network online, and a Democratic leader has never asked me that question. The idea that they would take advice from a populist is disdainful to them. Now, which side seems more open and inclusive? Which side seems more welcoming, and which side tries really hard to drive you away if you disagree even a little with orthodoxy? Which side is asking for suggestions, and which one is demanding compliance and obedience? This is so fascinating. You got, okay, again, if you're autistic, I'm sorry, you might not be able to follow this, but if you put the autism away, you don't need Cenk to be fully red-pilled to recognize how significant, like, he has now a very strong natural incentive to align himself with MAGA. Which means he's going to be out there blathering on the internet to his astroturfed audience about why they need to get behind MAGA. The momentum here is developing so quickly. The rats are abandoning the sinking ship. The regime is cooked. Now, certain people have not gotten the message yet. It's no coincidence that Jaguar. This is just the cosmic synchronicities here. That this iconic British brand still thinks that we live in, 2021. All right, that's all you need to see. Lulu Changmaservi, she showed up here on the show before. She's got a great take on this from a brand marketing perspective. She says, taste aside, from a purely strategic perspective, this brand marketing is disastrous for Jaguar. For context, Jaguar sales have been plummeting, down 70% in the U.S. in 5 years. It's a crisis. Their number one strategic imperative for comms and marketing should be to sell cars. So let's analyze it through that lens. Up to 2018, Jaguar was actually growing quickly, doubling sales in a few years. Their subsequent decline was caused by two main things. One, lagging innovation and engineering. Jaguar went 5 years without releasing a new production model, and their technology felt outdated. Two, unclear positioning. Jaguar got stuck between lanes. They used to be associated with classic sophistication and luxury, competing effectively with Bentley and Aston Martin in a rarefied space. But then they shifted down to premium, competing with the likes of BMW and Mercedes in a more crowded market. Jaguar SUV sales are cannibalized by their own sister brand, Range Rover. Now they're not upscale enough to compete in the luxury market and not cutting edge enough to compete in the premium market. Doubling down. Even at a basic level, we know that any Jaguar rebrand should, one, highlight innovation and engineering, and two, pick a clear lane for branding. Here, they've done the opposite. This campaign is about collaborating with a collective of original creators across the arts, according to Jaguar's website, which has been taken over by the rebrand. That message is roughly the opposite of what Jaguar should be saying, which is some version of, our cars are engineered to the gills and go very, very fast. Art school grads simply aren't associated with elite engineering ability, I'm sorry. It's possible a marketing exec read too many think pieces about how millennials shop based on values and forgot that people want cars that are really well built. On top of that, instead of choosing a clear lane, Jaguar's brand has meandered further into no man's land. Literally, this is not for men. While men have been an important audience for Jaguar historically, it's a favored ride for James Bond and Bruce Wayne, the latest campaign features 6 women and 2 people of indistinguishable gender. One appears to be a man, but I don't want to assume. If they're going to abandon the male audience, they should replace it with a more lucrative audience, and it's unclear who they're going for here. Vegans? So the same way Jaguar lost the ultra luxury segment without winning the premium segment, with this campaign, they're losing the classic sophistication audience without winning the just stop oil audience. It's risky to be an orphan brand. Missed zeitgeist. Lastly, Jaguar simply failed to read the room. We are in an era of nostalgia. People want to return. Tradition, heritage, and classics are more in demand than they've been for a long time. Jaguar was perfectly positioned. Jaguar's iconic image of an old-school British gentleman, think Sir Roger Moore, a known devotee of the brand, would have been a massive asset in today's environment. Why not a retro-themed campaign contrasting state-of-the-art technology with a 70s aesthetic? Time for a turnaround. This is like when movies used to come out in other countries a year after they were done showing in Hollywood. The vibe of this rebrand might have worked in 2021, but to drop this late 2024 only emphasizes the reasons for Jaguar's brand decline in the first place. It's outdated and confusing. Apparently, Jaguar is planning a broader brand reset for 2025. From early indications, that reset is misguided and likely to fail. Jaguar is a luxury product, so their brand can make or break sales, and in this case, they'll need a U-turn to get back on track. Jason's running a victory lap. She's a fantastic marketing mind. She really gets this, which is in part because she's extremely on Twitter, so she's tapped into the zeitgeist. An update on the Infowars bankruptcy auction. This is from @Amuse on Twitter. Infowars auction fraud exposed in bombshell federal court filing. The emergency motion submitted by First United American Companies LLC, or FUAC, a business associated with Alex Jones, to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, highlighting what FUAC describes as serious procedural misconduct in the ongoing, highly questionable bankruptcy case involving Alex Jones. FUAC is seeking to disqualify a clearly dubious bid from Global Tetrahedron LLC, aka The Onion, which was accepted by the trustee overseeing the sale of certain assets of Free Speech Systems LLC, Alex Jones's company. Background. The trustee appointed to oversee Alexander Jones's Chapter 7 case initiated what was supposed to be a transparent auction process to sell off assets of Free Speech Systems LLC. However, the trustee's actions have raised significant doubts regarding the legitimacy of the sale proceedings. Bidder process issues. FUAC initially submitted a qualified bid of $1.2 million, and Global Tetrahedron submitted a bid of $1 million. Despite FUAC's higher offer, the trustee unilaterally and without justification altered the auction from an advertised live online auction to a secretive final and best bid process, conducted under the guise of complexity. FUAC subsequently increased its bid to $3.5 million, while Global Tetrahedron offered only $1.75 million. So literally half. Despite FUAC's superior offer, the trustee chose to accept Global Tetrahedron's lower bid. Contention. FUAC argues that the trustee's acceptance of Global Tetrahedron's bid was not only improper but highly irregular. The bid relied on a so-called distributable proceeds waiver, DPW, a gimmick that offered no real value to the estate and seemed to act as an improper credit bid, something that had not been authorized by the court. Essentially, the DPW was an artificial mechanism designed to offset the cash difference in Global Tetrahedron's lower bid, tilting the process unfairly in its favor. Collusion allegations. FUAC explicitly accuses the trustee of colluding with Global Tetrahedron and the Connecticut families, the creditors in the case, to undermine the integrity of the auction process. So the Connecticut families are the ones who sued him and won the judgment. Now that judgment, he doesn't have the assets to satisfy the judgment, so it's going to be taken from his future earnings. So they have there's a credit there that they own, that he needs to, like, his future earnings are going to be seized and sent to them. They're pledging that credit to make up the difference in the bid. So they're going to buy his assets, or they're going to bid for and acquire his assets using the money that he owes them from his future earnings that they have not received yet, and on top of that, that is currently on appeal. This is like preposterously corrupt, circular, obviously motivated by simple malice. It's transparently, laughably evil. Extremely Talmudic, yes. The sudden switch to a secretive bid format and the acceptance of a bid riddled with contingencies was done without any disclosure or approval from the court, effectively rigging the auction to assure global tetrahedron would win. This orchestrated effort robbed FUAC, the rightful higher bidder, of a fair chance and turned what should have been a straightforward process into a farce. Improper procedure. FUAC points out that the trustees' actions directly violate a sale order issued by the court. The sale order explicitly required that bids be submitted in specific dollar amounts without contingencies. It also mandated that any changes to the auction process be announced publicly at the live auction. The trustee did none of these things, instead opting for clandestine changes that served only to favor a lower bid from a preferred bidder. Request for relief. FUAC seeks to have the global tetrahedron bid disqualified, citing improper collusion, bad faith, and blatant violations of established auction procedures. It urges the court to declare FUAC's $3.5 million bid the winning bid, honoring the original and more transparent conditions of the sale order. So it'll be very interesting to see how that proceeds. The judge has already indicated that he is not at all impressed with the shenanigans that were pulled by the trustee. So I wouldn't be surprised if this winds up just being a resounding victory. And FUAC, that the higher bidder, is someone who's working closely with Alex Jones. The purpose of it is to buy it and give it right back to him. Colin Rush says, these idiots don't understand that Alex is Infowars. You can't just buy the brand and keep the audience. Yeah, right. I was talking with Cooper about this morning. He's like, that audience of all people. Like, you think you're going to pull one over on the Infowars audience? Were you guys born yesterday? Were you born in a barn? Do you not understand people? This is also why they were trying to take his name. And the judge struck that down because they said it's a per se violation of the 13th Amendment. They can't just take his name, and he can no longer he can no longer use his own person to make money. It's like blatant slavery, basically. They're just trying to squeeze every last little thing they can get out of him on their way out. And I would like to see the absolute book thrown at them. There was maybe a possibility for that. We'll get to Matt Gaetz here in just a minute. Got a couple of dark stories here. So, first one is an update on what's going on in North Carolina. This is from Matt Van Swoel, former nuclear scientist for the U.S. Department of Engineering, ex-photographer for Apple, United, and Hyatt, head of subscription growth at Wisecam. The land grab narrative you've been hearing from people in Western North Carolina is not a conspiracy theory. Here's how it goes. A, your family lives on 30 acres of land by the river worth approximately $225,000. B, Helene rolls in and wipes out your home and floods about 50% of your land. C, you now live in a tent with your kids and have applied to get a temporary housing unit from FEMA. D, FEMA shows up, takes a look around and says, sorry, we can't give you a trailer to live on in this land. You're in a flood zone. E, you say, okay, I don't want to live in a tent with my kids anymore. What should I do? F, FEMA says, you can sell your land to us for the current tax evaluation of $18,000 and we will put you up in a nice warm RV. G, you say, wait, I can't sell this land for $18,000. It's worth at least 10x that, and it's the only asset I have. H, FEMA says, okay, no worries, bye. I, now you are stuck living in your tent with your 3 kids, wondering if you should sell the only thing you have left to your name just to have a warm place for your family to sleep. That's the land grab. And to add to it, then HHS will come and take your kids from you because you can't have your kids living in a tent. This cannot go under the radar. That's why I'm talking about it here. I appreciate you guys who put this in front of me, because this is the last story was like cartoon supervillain evil. This is actual supervillain evil. This is like the people who are perpetrating this scheme, which is very similar to what's been done in past natural disasters. I told you guys the story before about Hurricane Katrina and being down on the coast, and insurance pulling the same game. The whole system just working to plunder the people while they're victims of a natural disaster. And heads need to roll. Another clip from Brian Romelli here, and this one's dark. He says, I'm sorry to do this to you. This is part of what 2025 will look like. There's no other way to prepare you, and I want to prepare you. It's best to put away anything that resembles politics and take a long step back and just see. The lights are turned on.
Tony Fauci made sure that none of those kids had guardians, which is illegal, and then he hid what he was doing from the boards. He took foster homes in 6 states, and he turned them over to the pharmaceutical industry. You know, there's videos of these children, an old BBC documentary that will make you cry. I promise you cannot look at these without weeping. One of these kids, a 12-year-old who's trying to protect the 8 years old, and he has a tube in his stomach. And Celia Farber, who's this amazing researcher who worked on this chapter for me and did a lot of the original research on it, she actually went up to Hawthorne, New York, to the Gates of Heaven cemetery. She found the cemetery where Fauci was disposing of the corpses of these children who died in his illegal experiments. She found an open pit. It was actually covered by an astroturf carpet. And she opened the astroturf carpet and she saw hundreds and hundreds of tiny little coffins stacked haphazardly upon each other, because these are children who have no parents and nobody was there to protect them.
This is why Matt Gaetz is being appointed Attorney General. Elon, who just the other day posted about how his pronouns are still prosecute Fauci, said this: Matt Gaetz has 3 critical assets that are needed for the AG role: a big brain, a spine of steel, and an axe to grind. He is the Judge Dredd America needs to clean up a corrupt system and put powerful bad actors in prison. Gaetz will be our hammer of justice. As far as these accusations against him, I consider them worth less than nothing. Under our laws, a man is considered innocent until proven guilty. If A.G. Garland, an unprincipled douchebag, could have secured a conviction against Gaetz, he would have, but he knew he could not. Case closed. And here's a little peek into the mind of Matt Gaetz. Let me turn the volume up here a little bit more. Make sure you guys can hear it. This is why Matt Gaetz is an existential threat to these people. And shout out to James Poulos for having getting this interview with Gaetz.
Briefing. That can inform your perspective on where markets are likely to move, what technologies are going to be deemed essential, and that information gets monetized. It gets turned into cold, hard cash, and that's a really hard thing to argue against with an idea that would otherwise have merit and make common sense.
Whether it's Nancy Pelosi or a few others who have been sort of questioned about this kind of activity, they'll say things like, well, this is a free market and Congress should be able to participate in that too. How is it that they think that they're on, or at least are willing to say that they're on the same kind of level playing field as the average American? Yeah,
Nancy Pelosi is on a level playing field from a free market standpoint with other traders in stocks, kind of like Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. We're on a level playing field with like everyone else hitting baseballs in the 90s. When you're juiced with extra information, then you have the ability to see the future. And that becomes an incredibly valuable thing in the marketplace. In some of these trades...
Shout out to Jason. Data is the new oil. When you're juiced with extra information, then you have the ability to see the future. Data, 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 data.
Nancy Pelosi is making millions upon millions of dollars, and it strains credulity to think that someone could win so reliably and so consistently in the marketplace when they're one of the people who has more information than almost anyone else on the planet, right? And why it's so hard to police and enforce. Really, I think kind of begs the question about the nature of information itself, right? There's not like a digital trail on knowledge that you acquire while a member of Congress. It's something that exists in one's mind, and so that's probably why you haven't seen effective prosecutions, because so much of it just happens through the osmosis of this place and what you learn and how you.
Notice what he said there.
That you acquire while a member of Congress. It's something that exists on, right? There's not like a digital trail on knowledge that you acquire while a member of Congress.
There's not a digital trail on knowledge you acquire as a member of Congress. There's a point that Jason dropped when he was talking to AA, just kind of threw it out there toward the end of the conversation. He said, one of his predictions is that Congress is going to be replaced by AI. Congress is it's an analog algorithm right now. Replacing Congress with AI is a formality. It's just a matter of time. It's going to happen. It's already effectively close to that. It's kind of it is a formality. Congress is a formality right now. That doesn't. Its expiration date is appearing on the horizon. How quickly we'll get to that horizon, who knows? Could be real quick. Could take a little longer. But this is a very interesting thing that Gaetz says here.
It's something that exists in one's mind, and so that's probably why you haven't seen effective prosecutions, because so much of it just happens through the osmosis of this place and what you learn and how you can turn that into market gains.
Yeah, about that osmosis. I mean, it's not just Nancy Pelosi; it's others who say, well, it's the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me. It was my husband, or it was my financial advisor, or it was my second cousin twice removed. It was the one-armed man. How do you get your arms around that when you're looking at legislation?
Well, that's why what we've done to date has failed. There was this belief that you didn't have to ban congressional stock trading. You could just require disclosures, and that those disclosures would shame people into conduct that was better and more virtuous, and that created more public trust around lawmaking. The reality is folks have become so brazen, like they're willing to tell you that they're on the Armed Services Committee and trading Raytheon stock. They're willing to tell you they're on the Energy and Commerce Committee and killing it on energy trades that they're making. They're willing to tell you they're leading the Ethics Committee, and it's okay that they're making just the right precise moves on online gambling stocks, for example. And the reason this is allowed to persist in the absence of stronger laws, because both sides are doing it, right? Bipartisanship can be one of the most insidious things in this town when it's bipartisan corruption, when it's a bipartisan consensus around self-dealing and self-enrichment. And that's what we have here: powerful people on both sides of the aisle who are lining their pockets. And it's these offenses are not victimless, right? It distorts the marketplace. And I just imagine some poor schmuck with their 401k working, squirreling a little money away.
There's a reason why these people are freaking out about Gaetz. No one cares that much about all the other ones. Like, the Tulsi Russian asset is, RFK gets people pretty wound up, but Gaetz is the one that's got them hopping. Charlie Kirk says, I've had enough of this so-called House Ethics report on Matt Gaetz. The underlying allegations are so laughable and flimsy that the only purpose of it is to smear him. Here are the facts. The report comes years after DOJ dropped its investigation into the same claims. Why did the DOJ drop the investigation? Because the claims hinge on the testimony of two witnesses who have such gaping credibility issues that even the DOJ, which hates Gaetz, knew no jury would ever convict him. Who are these witnesses? 1. Joel Greenberg, ding, 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 who has been described as one of the most corrupt Florida politicians of all time, and who has literally made false sex allegations against a politician before. He accused an innocent school teacher who was running against him for tax collector of having sex with an underage student. Sound familiar? A judge called the lies, quote, downright evil. 2. Greenberg became embroiled in a series of crimes and faced a possible 27 years in federal prison. One of these crimes was having sex with an underage minor, the same 17-year-old who is the central character in the claims against Gaetz. But even Greenberg claims he didn't know she was underage because she lied about her age. She is now active on OnlyFans, selling sexual access for money, and has appeared in porn videos. Go figure. According to a 2023 lawsuit, Greenberg repeatedly begged Gaetz to secure a pardon for him. And when Gaetz refused, Greenberg vowed vengeance. An inmate who shared a cell with Greenberg told two federal agents that Greenberg told him that the woman, quote, would be willing to adopt Greenberg's lies in hopes of a future financial benefit, end quote. Greenberg admitted to paying the woman's legal bills in a text to a friend. Again, this is like, this is comical. It's blatant. These aren't even like competent people who are putting together an airtight case based on lies. It's just flimsy, shameless, like can't even get the DOJ to prosecute on it. Yes, this is all ridiculous. Yes, it is clearly contrived lies. Will the media still use it to tar and feather Gaetz? Absolutely. Gaetz has made a career of picking fights no one else in Washington had the stomach to pick. They fear him at the DOJ more than anyone. And that's exactly why we need him running the Department of Justice. He's the only one with the guts to fight the most important fights at the DOJ and root out the corruption we've seen on full display these last 8 years. Confirm Matt Gaetz. Hat tip to the great Molly Hemingway, who goes into even more detail here. So there's a link to the Federalist that goes into all this detail. If you're listening to this on the podcast later on, or you can go to kingpill.substack.com to the post where I upload this, and it'll have the link. It'll have the list of all of the links, and you can go read the Federalist article yourself if you would like. As Pete Quinones said, someone told Gaetz where all the bodies are buried. Indeed. That like Judge Dredd rhetoric from Elon that's meaningful. He's not just saying that willy-nilly. He knows exactly what message that is sending. That's not just for our eyes. That's for other people's eyes. That's for powerful people's eyes. We're coming. Get ready, motherfuckers. So I listened to Pete Hegseth on Sean Ryan because I fully support it. Absolutely, it's a wonderful, great thing to have him as Secretary of Defense. What I'm trying to sort out here is whether I'm trying to handicap the upside of this pick. How much do I trust him? Because he's a bro. I've known a lot of guys like him who are just bros and they're really good, fast, like slick talkers. But you can kind of tell that they may believe most of what they're saying, but them believing it is less important to them than them convincing you that they believe it. So I'm still, for me, jury's out on like the absolute upside of Hegseth. I think the downside is more than acceptable. It's absolutely a fantastic pick. I'm excited to see. I think he's going to genuinely do stuff at the DOD. But to what extent is he like actually a true believer, and to what extent is he a political animal? That's still kind of jury's out on that for me. However, when they started talking about education and homeschooling and classical Christian education, my ears really perked up, and it was very affirming, or like reaffirming or reassuring to me. Here's a good clip from it.
We moved to a school in Tennessee specifically because of the curriculum, the virtues, the belief systems of that school. It's a small, conservative, classical Christian rural school that reinforces our values. And we moved from New Jersey, where there were lots of wonderful people. Like states like that get a bad rap, but there's full of a lot of like faithful, conservative patriots. But, you know, the state of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, who famously said that the Bill of Rights is above his pay grade. So he just doesn't really think about it. He said that about COVID, but he's an idiot. They passed a bill recently that said gender identity training, which eventually turns out to be gender fluidity and trans stuff, is mandated in all government schools starting in first grade. And I say government schools intentionally. They're not public schools. They're government schools. I'm sure they may be open to the public in that sense, but the government is setting the tone. And I run into people all the time. I mean, you're dialed in, and so you've made that choice to homeschool, but there are a lot of dudes just like us who are like, hey, I pay property taxes. You know, I work hard. We move to a nice area that say the schools are good. We move here for the schools that feel like local control will say, even here in Tennessee, where, hey, I've got a good school. Good means, you know, a fancy gym and an iPad and, you know, high SAT scores. And those are all fine things. What I want to know is what's being pumped into the minds of those kids. And what you realize when you pull the curtain back over 100 years is the entire pipeline of our education system has been federalized intentionally. And taken over not just by like lefties or technocrats or bureaucrats. Everyone you meet through that timeline who's pushing hard on the shoulder on the plow of education is an atheist, a Marxist, or a socialist, or a humanist. There are a lot of them humanist. Which is
What's a humanist?
Humanist is basically it completely rejects Christianity or faith at all, and so it's all humanity is at the center of good and evil, right and wrong. It's effectively secularism posited as an alternative religion to Christianity.
Oh.
So it'll find politics as an avenue, and so humanists are often socialists or Marxists or communists alongside being a humanist. But it's the worship of mankind as the highest being, as opposed to God as the highest being. So they're all that's the train of people pushing this educational philosophy. And I used to think it started in the 60s. It actually goes back to the progressive era and even before that. But they very intentionally, the one thing they knew they had to remove from the beginning was God. God had to come out of the schools because God was the immovable object that prevented their utopian schemes. They wanted, if you want to manipulate children, if you want to change the way they think, rewire the relationship of families, you have to get at the God thing because the garden and the sin in the garden is all disrupts those utopian schemes. And so the early progressives, communists, Marxists, very intentionally worked hard in creating systems that slowly but surely removed God. Because if you went into a public school, government school in America.
So is this segment of the conversation that really reassured me a lot more about him? That there's actually, he has that whole like bro aesthetic, but there's actually a pretty good amount of depth there, and almost the education thing is almost like his forte. Kind of like he's the military guy. He's very concerned about the military, the state of military. Like that's he's a military guy through and through. But where he really comes alive is talking about education. So there's actually you'd make a great, if we were going to have a Department of Education, he'd make a great Secretary of Education, I think, interestingly. Pekin Yoda says, don't ignore who Gaetz' brother-in-law is. Yes, indeed. Gaetz' brother-in-law is Palmer Luckey. The Thiel connections abound. Palmer Luckey, the founder and head of Anduril. Former Joe Biden press secretary Michael LaRosa, in response to MSNBC guest Sherilyn Ifill, calling Pete Hegseth a white supremacist, quote, "This shit has to stop. Opposing DEI initiatives does not make you a white supremacist." So this is Jill Biden's press secretary. This shit has to stop. Opposing DEI initiatives does not make you a white supremacist. Conversations of demonization like this are a big part of the reason we got our asses kicked. The answer to extremism is not more extremism. Voices like this on the left are turning the Democratic Party into a joke. We've got to knock it off and get serious guests who are going to diagnose politics, not make it worse. Name-calling, vilifying, and defaming nominees you oppose, even if there's very good reason to oppose them, represents everything the Democratic Party should be running away from. Let's fight back with a strategy and tactics, not pointless defamatory and juvenile invective. We need to get serious people opining about policy and politics, not one-upping each other or competing for who you can make the most provocative insult about a Trump nominee you oppose. This might as well have been written by frickin' Jonah Goldberg or Eric Erickson or David French circa, I don't know, 2014. This is straight up just, this is conservatism. This is political conservatism now in Jill Biden's press secretary. It's now been confirmed. Donald Trump is expected to pick Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick as Commerce Secretary. If you've been listening, you know who Howard Lutnick is. You know the story behind Howard Lutnick. You've gone and you've listened to the conversation he had with Anthony Pompliano. You've heard Pete and Stormy talk about the significance of his background and the points that he hit on that conversation with Pompliano. So having him as Commerce Secretary is going to be very, very good. This is just kind of telling a bit of his backstory. He lost 658 employees in the 9/11 attacks in 2001, including friends and family members, and specifically his brother, who they were orphaned together. So they had a very, very tight bond, and his brother was killed in the 9/11 attacks. It just so happened that Lutnick was dropping his kid off at school and was late into the office that day and went in there, ran in and tried to find his employees. The plane hit immediately underneath his offices. And he had to hide underneath a car when the tower, I think it was the South Tower, collapsed and got just covered in soot and everything. Lost the entire office, including his brother. How do you think he feels about the perpetration of 9/11? You think he knows who was behind it? This is him talking about the Trump tariff plan.
And of course, it's a bargaining chip. We can't sell a Ford.
Hold on. Let me pull the volume up here and speed it up just a wee bit. He's a very fun guy to listen to. Very enthusiastic and a huge Bitcoin guy. This is another thing that is, I think, underappreciated, is just how significant the Trump administration's posture to Bitcoin is going to be.
And of course, it's a bargaining chip. We can't sell a Ford or GM in Europe. You go to Europe, you can't sell a Ford or GM. Why? There's 100% tariffs. How about in Japan? 100% tariffs. So do you think if we said, we're going to tariff you the way you tariff us, do you think they're going to allow Mercedes and all these Japanese companies and Porsches and BMWs to all of a sudden have 100% tariffs in America? Of course not. They're going to come and negotiate, and their tariffs are going to come down. And finally, Ford and General Motors are going to be able to sell in these places.
How's that sound?
Of course they're going to come down. Of course. This is just negotiating.
It absolutely makes sense. If you do it strategically, if it's across the board, it creates a real problem. And the question is whether you believe the president is going to do it strategically or across the board. He keeps saying it across the board.
Well, when you're running for office, you make broad statements so people understand.
These eggheads are so fucking stupid. He's like, we're going to use tariffs strategically. And Trump comes in, he's like, yep, I'm just going to lay them out across the board. And these guys are like, oh, if he does that, oh, imagine what'll happen. You have to use it strategically. Yeah, we're going to use it strategically. But you said you were going to do it to everything. You understand what would happen if you do it to everything? It's like, shut the fuck up. Let the man negotiate. You don't get any leverage if you say, yeah, I'm using this as a big stick, but I would prefer to not hit you with the big stick. So you should just back down so I don't actually have to hit you with the big stick. Well, if you hit him with the big stick, it'll be bad. You might knock a tooth out. They might get a cut on their cheek. It just,
Okay, tariffs are an amazing tool by the president to use. They're an amazing tool, but he understands, don't tariff stuff we don't make, right? If we don't make it and you want to buy it, I don't want to put the price up there. It's pointless, but use tariffs to build in America. If we want to make it in America, tariff it, or if we're competing with it, tariff it. But you got to remember, we need to protect the American worker. Finally, someone's going to protect the American worker, and Donald Trump is here to protect the American worker.
Do you think we make a lot of money in tariffs, or if they're used as negotiating tactics? Look, tariffs will come down there. We're not going to have super high tariffs here either. There's not going to be a big pot of money at the end of the day.
I love that story. So which is it? Do we make a lot of money on tariffs, or we bring productivity here and we drive up our workers here? So it's a win-win scenario. I like both of them. I think what's going to happen is we'll make a bunch of money on the tariffs, but mostly everybody else is going to negotiate with us, and we will be more fair. In 1948, right, we came up with something called the Marshall Plan, right? The world, Germany and Japan were destroyed after World War II, and we wanted to export our economy to them. So we made a rule. They could tariff us, and we won't tariff them. So they can rebuild.
This is the best explanation I've heard of.
So they can rebuild their economy. We rebuilt their economy using something called the Marshall Plan.
Yeah.
Where have you heard this almost word for word in the past few weeks? Literally word for word. This is remarkable. The co-chair of the transition team, the incoming commerce secretary, is talking about how the Marshall Plan was the key to the rest of the world being developed on the backs of Americans.
Economy is so awesome that we'll use it to help you rebuild. When should that have ended? What do you think, 1980? Right? 1985? I mean, why 40 years are Japan and Germany and all of Europe still tariffing the heck out of our auto industry, tariffing the heck out of our furniture industry? Do you realize all your furniture you're buying that's made foreign? It seems crazy. Why? It's because they tariff us and we don't tariff them. It's so obvious.
I love listening to him talk. Here's Kevin O'Leary talking about Elon and the utility of X and Doge here.
You got to remember, politicians have to raise money. These days, they do it using social media. Now, what Elon has, that people keep forgetting, because they say, well, he doesn't have a legislative mandate here. And I say, oh, he's got better than that. He's got X. So what happens is you're in some state somewhere and you own a project to nothing and you're spending $2 billion. He just will shame you out. He'll start naming to all of your voters exactly what you've done wrong and what you're not doing to fix it. And I love the concept of just squeezing heads to stop waste, because all he has to do is turn on the machine. Now, it's going to be very contentious. I've said this multiple times about this mandate. The power he has is not to be underestimated, because if you can get to the voter of that governor or that senator that's wasting money in his eyes, and he can make a good case on X, you're going to cause a lot of damage in that constituency. And I love this idea because it's a negotiation. That's what it is. If you don't fix this, I'm going to call you out.
The narrative control. And Elon highlights it. He says, and we will. Confirming it. Relatedly with Elon, this is great. So here's Elon playing video games. What is this, Diablo? I know he likes to play Diablo a lot. I don't Diablo. But this is a funny clip. This is him doing business while he's playing.
Say 2026 at the latest for AGI. Roughly 1% chance of civilization ending in any given century. Optimus is really going to be next level. You'll be able to skin Optimus in a wide, pretty much with anything. So people on the internet have asked me to make catgirls real. And actually, you can make catgirls real if you have a robot. If you have a robot catgirl. Optimus will be able to pick up the kids from school. And Optimus will be able to be school if you want. Be able to teach kids anything. Yeah, and it'll support any language too. I think AGI will be next year. Probably. It's not next year. It's, say, 2026 at the latest for AGI. Latest. I hope it's nice to us. One defines AGI as smarter than any human. I think we're less than 24 months away from that. Yeah, please be nice to us, AGI. Humanoid robots will usher in a level of abundance that's hard to imagine. There will be no shortage of goods and services. Yeah, Optimus can be your bodyguard. People will have Optimus in their home. I think probably everyone's going to have an Optimus. Maybe more than one. The price of Optimus. I mean, ultimately, I think Optimus is probably like $20,000 or something like that, maybe 30. At volume production, Optimus, the parts in Optimus will cost less than a car. Long term is probably $20,000, $30,000. I think future wars between major powers will be drone wars. Drones don't miss. I don't think you want to have people fighting drones. That's for sure. I mean, long term, I think there'll be more. The ratio of humanoid robots will be more than 1-to-1. So there might be 2 humanoid robots or more, maybe 10 for every 1 human, which means well in excess of 10 billion humanoid robots. I
remember some of our guys talking a few months back about how Elon needs to get in the business of building his own private security force. That's exactly what he's doing.
I'm not going to do a Tesla phone. Retail's with you, Tesla. Thanks. Thank you, retail shareholders of Tesla. Appreciate the support, guys.
Play video games while your Tesla is self-driving.
It's not legal yet, but inevitably that will happen.
So it is possible, it's just not legal.
Yeah, we have to turn it off. You have to turn off, you're not allowed to play video in the front screen or any kind of interactive game. So we can play it in the rear screen, but once things are approved for self-driving, basically people are just going to sit in the car and be on their phone or watch a movie on the screen.
Just drive me to the airport or anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'll just play Diablo 4.
Yeah.
Well on the road.
Pretty much.
Probably connected with Starlink or...
Yeah. Cars are all going to drive themselves. It's going to be humanoid robots everywhere, and people will look back and, wow, they used to drive the cars themselves? That's crazy.
People look back and say, wow, they used to drive themselves? That's crazy. I would say don't... I think Elon has demonstrated a track record here where when he's charting these kinds of predictions, I'm inclined to very much listen. Doesn't matter how I feel about it. If he's not exactly right, he's at least directionally right. Hey, look at that. Greetings, sir.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. We'll have the people tell us how the audio balance is.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Did you see the first clip that I played today?
No, what I miss. I'm just now tuning in.
I'll send it to you afterwards. It's Mr. Brightside, like a folk cover of Mr. Brightside. It was very good.
Okay.
We're talking about Elon right now, and so there was the big launch today. I haven't seen how it went yet, but I saw the hoopla about Trump going out to meet up with Elon for the Starship launch, and this one here, I was just marveling at this. Elon posted this early this morning. A tweet originally from SpaceX. Frickin' look at this. It says mock diamonds. Look how frickin' cool that is.
What am I looking at? A rocket?
Yeah. I guess the mock diamonds, I don't what are this, aeronautical engineering or whatever. I guess the mock diamond is this shape here.
Okay.
It's like an indicator that you're reaching Mach velocity. But just, I mean, human beings created this. This is frickin' remarkable. It's been so long since we could just like look and see these incredibly phenomenal feats of engineering. There was I actually bookmarked this just before I went live. Have you seen how big the Starship is?
No.
This is how big it is. Elon retweeted this from Tesla Economics, just so everyone knows how fucking massive Starship is. Here's a human next to it. Look at how fucking gargantuan that thing is.
It's like a skyscraper.
Yeah, I think it's like 22 stories tall. Look at that. This is insane. I've sort of been aware of what's happening. Oh, he's doing his launches and they're big and he catches them and everything. But I never stopped to appreciate the absolute scale of this. This is genuinely remarkable stuff. And it just like barely cracks people's awareness. We're living in the future.
There's something very symbolic about this.
The phallus.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're penetrating the sky.
Yeah.
It's big and pointy. Have you seen the video where the age of men has returned? You seen the video where he talks about how they intentionally dedicated engineering time to making it pointier? Like they could have it a lot more blunt, but it was from what's the movie with Sacha Baron Cohen in it? The Dictator. Or he's like, it needs to be pointier. It needs to be it just looks more impressive if it's pointier. And they thought that was funny. So they actually went out of their way to make it pointier, even though there's not only no engineering benefit to it, it actually maybe makes it slightly less aerodynamic. But they were just committed to the bit for the sake of the meme.
Interesting that a less pointy object would be more aerodynamic. I mean, far be it from me to weigh in on how this shit works, because I drive a truck and I have the IQ of a fish, but albeit a smart fish, but a fish nonetheless.
Well, speaking of IQ, no question about this guy's IQ. This is the episode I told you about this earlier, Cooper, and then I mentioned this earlier in the stream that this conversation with Peter Thiel on the Hoover Institute is very, very good.
Looks like he's lost some weight.
Yeah,
well, I don't know how recent this is.
This is I don't know when they recorded it, but he does look like he's thinner. Part of it might be the haircut. I'm not sure, but he seems incredibly stressed out.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel says the greatest existential risk to mankind is a totalitarian one-world government, and by trying to control the other existential risks, we may wind up with the worst of all.
I would also like...
volume's really low on all of these.
I'd like to throw in one more existential risk that, in my mind, is as big as all these technological risks of nuclear war and runaway bioweapons and weaponized AI with on autonomous weapon systems, and that's the risk of a totalitarian one world government. And again, we can, like with all the other existential risks, it's hard to know how to measure these things probabilistically because we only have one world. Once you get a totalitarian one world government, you can't reverse it. And then the reason I like to throw that risk in is that it seems to me that the implicit solution to existential risks of all the other sorts is to lean in to a sort of very non-democratic one world state that will highly regulate and stop these technologies. And if Greta gets everyone on the planet to ride a bicycle, maybe that's a way to solve climate change. But it has sort of this quality of going from the frying pan into the fire.
There's a very interesting point that, well, first of all, if you go watch this episode and your takeaway from it is that Peter Thiel is some sort of a sociopathic, transhumanist technocrat who is plotting to take over the world.
Like a year ago?
No, I've never had that take on him. I've said I don't necessarily know what all of his intentions are, but it's also a lot has happened in the last year.
Might be a sociopath, I think are the words you used exactly.
And what I'm saying is, if you watch this and especially taken with the other interviews he's done over the last year, basically, and if you watch this one, it's impossible to come away with that take.
Okay, so you were wrong.
Yes. I didn't say, I said he might be, I don't know. I said, I'm not ruling out that possibility. I am now ruling out that possibility.
Gotcha.
It is not possible that's what he is. And I was talking with Jason about this yesterday, and he pointed out as well that it's very clear from listening to him that he is in the mindset of he's fighting a spiritual battle. There is absolutely massive spiritual implications to everything that's going on right now. And also, Jason says here in the chat, I watched a Hoover talk with him from 2 years ago, back to back with this one. He's thinner, and his stutter is almost zero in the current talk. After Thiel went on Rogan, one of the things Jason said this, and I agreed with it, that his stutter is often kind of strategic. He's doing it intentionally he's leaning on it as a bit of a crutch because he has this very Straussian way of talking and communicating. And he's very private. He's doing everything he can to not get himself dragged into some kind of scandal that pulls him even more out into the public. So he's very, very careful about everything he says. But if you listen to him enough and you recognize that about him, then you can see the wheels turning and you could start to understand what he's saying without saying. Stalling, yeah, it's like a stalling tactic. And this one here, very, very little stuttering. He was absolutely in his element. I think the next one here, yeah. Good.
Straight Buster says he looked up the Starship stats and it's 400 feet tall.
400 feet. That's incredible.
Unrelatedly, how much longer do you think YouTube is going to fact check us and tell us that the AP is called the presidential race for Donald Trump, as if we were saying anything other than that? Because I get that banner every time I open this up.
Maybe inauguration day? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
So here's the summary and key points from this conversation. I wanted to touch on a few of these things because this is the alternative to sitting and listening to the entire conversation and commenting on it as we go. So they first talk about how Thiel sees modern technology, nuclear weapons, AI, and bioweapons as having genuine apocalyptic potential that aligns with biblical predictions about humanity's capacity for self-destruction. And one of the things that he said was he quoted, actually, let me get the exact quote because I sent this so I can pull it up right away here. He summarized something that Rene Girard said. The apocalypse is just a scientific prediction of what humanity is likely to do in a world of ever more powerful technology. And he kind of qualified and added to it and said, also with like the absence of divinity. If you take divinity out of the equation and mankind has ever more powerful technology, the end result of that is going to be the apocalypse. So descriptions, mythological or prophetic descriptions of the apocalypse, that's essentially what they're describing. The development of nuclear weapons in 1945 made apocalyptic scenarios suddenly technologically feasible. Prior to that, the idea that human beings could create an apocalypse was kind of, it was like how are human beings going to destroy the world? Yet after the development of nuclear weapons, now there's all sorts of different things. There's all these different conspiracies of all these different things that could destroy the world. It could be a massive bioweapon. It could be nuclear war. It could be climate change. It could be AI, Skynet. It could be any number of different things that now the apocalypse suddenly seems much nearer to us.
I mean, okay, just to give my impression of all of this, there could be like all of these various doomsday scenarios. I think like they're plausible, or there could be something to them. I don't completely dismiss them, but I'm also kind of skeptical when people get a little worked up about this shit. It just feels to me like it's like the modern atheistic materialist religion. It's their version of like eschatology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the role that it fills in their.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the role that it fills, and I disagree. I don't know. People have been saying this kind of shit forever, that it's the end, and I'm not too worried about it. I'm also retarded, so
we'll get back to that here in just a second. Let me go through this part here because he addresses that basically directly. Says despite advances in computing and AI, Thiel argues there's been a broader technological slowdown in the physical world. He suggests this slowdown may be partly due to unconscious fear of technology's destructive potential. Progress has become limited to a narrow cone around computers, internet, and AI, while other areas have stagnated. So you're kind of drawing a through line here. You have the development of nuclear weapons that make apocalyptic scenarios technologically feasible, which in turn causes people to become fearful of technology, which causes a technological slowdown in the physical world. And the effect of this is that it's actually amplifying and increasing the potential for an apocalyptic scenario, paradoxically. So modern existential risks would be nuclear weapons, bioweapons, artificial intelligence or autonomous weapons, environmental risks, or the rise of totalitarian one-world government, which Thiel sees as a potential solution to other risks that could be worse than the problems. So all of these risks have, and humanity's awareness of them have developed, which has made people fearful of technology, which has induced them to want to build a one world government to constrain all of those things. And so in running away from apocalypse, everyone runs into Antichrist. That's like his thesis he's working out.
Okay, I think that's there might be something to that. However, it does seem a little deterministic to me that like people are scared of like going in like the technology direction because that's going to cause the end of the world. And then paradoxically, by refraining from going in the technology direction, or whatever terminology Peter Thiel uses, from refraining and going in that direction, they're also creating the end of the world. It's like, okay, so in other words, it's just the end of the world. That's where we're going. Which I guess is not completely wrong, but
yeah. I mean, that's like this is the tale of human experience. Is like running through this. Like theoretically, this could go on for centuries, millennia.
Yeah.
You can look at this as like a cycle that's repeating itself and amplifying, but there's theoretically no limit to how much it could amplify. The limit is God, effectively, because God is like the constraint on reality. And what was I going to say? So you have this is like the rise and fall, the cycle of human experience. And it's interesting that there's like the cyclical theory of history And then there's the linear theory of history. And the linear theory of history is something from the Hebraic tradition. The cyclical theory of history is the linear theory of history is something unique to Christianity. Christianity is like the birthplace of that perception. Otherwise, ancient people all believe like everything's just in these constant cycles. But the thing is, like, both are true. There is a linear theory of history and there's a cyclical theory of history. It's if you imagine the shape that is formed, if you imagine a line progressing linearly combined with a circle, it creates a vortex. And a vortex is roughly triangular, shaped like a triangle.
I've always called that the vortex you're describing. That's what I've referred to as cyclical. I've always had like three distinctions in my mind, or three categories, that being linear, circular, and then cyclical in the middle.
Yes,
synthesis of those two.
Right, exactly. So it's not linear or cyclical. It's linear and cyclical, which makes a vortex shape, which is part of what I find so compelling about a lot of the vortex math and science and stuff that's being done with like Randall Carlson with his thunderstorm generator. And what's the guy's name? Not Ashton Forbes. He's the orbs guy. Austin Whitsitt. There's something very fundamental about the vortex. It's very fundamental to reality on like a material and a metaphysical level. Anyways, AI.
When is Robert Edward Grant gonna blow up? That guy's fascinating.
That's true. Like, I drop in every once in a while to see the stuff he talks about, but he brings in so much of the stuff that's just plainly, like transparently, like hocus pocus stuff to me that, I mean, if you're losing me on that front, then you're going pretty far. But yeah, and he's another one of the vortex guys. There's something to the vortexes. Continuing with the interview here with Thiel, AI-specific concerns. ChatGPT passing the Turing test represents a significant milestone. That is one thing he mentioned, I believe, on Joe Rogan, and he said a few times now that he believes ChatGPT has passed the Turing test. He views AI risks as comparable to the advent of the internet in terms of societal impact. He notes how AI went from being viewed positively to negatively much faster than previous technologies. And then they mentioned the concept of the catacon, which is from the Greek meaning that which restrains or holds back chaos. Thiel sees it as representing forces or institutions that help prevent either total chaos, Armageddon, or total control, Antichrist. He argues for finding a narrow path between these extremes rather than completely withdrawing from engagement. They mentioned the Benedict option, and he like comprehensively repudiates it. He's like, I think he called it like moral cowardice. He said he doesn't like necessarily want to get in a fight with Rod Dreher over it, but he said, he's not going to argue with maybe like the individual sanctification aspect of just completely withdrawing. But he said on like a social political level, he says, I think you have an obligation to not just completely withdraw because that's the most accelerationist option.
Yeah, that there's no constraint on the bad people.
Exactly. Yes. What is the Lord Acton quote that he mentions? It's the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah.
And then historical perspective. Thiel contrasts cyclical views of history like ancient Greek historians with the Judeo-Christian view of history having direction and meaning. He argues that understanding current events requires recognizing unique historical circumstances rather than just looking for historical parallels. So history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes.
Is Lord Acton, was he also the guy who had that...
Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely?
Yeah, that guy?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a bone to pick with him.
Yeah.
I think the first quote is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The first one that you mentioned, like, okay. The second one, it just, to me, feels like Enlightenment propaganda.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I remember when I felt super transgressive the first time I had that thought.
Yeah, well, the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely, like, certainly power can corrupt people or whatever, but, like, if you actually have absolute power, what is there to corrupt you? I mean, your own passions, I suppose, but, like, Is someone going to bribe you? You already have all the money. Someone going to like offer you power? You already have all the power, you know?
Right. Like it flies in the face of the
which Louis
notion.
was it? I'm pretty sure it was Louis the whatever, the Sun King. I'm pretty sure this is what he said to his son. Like, was basically like, you can't. What are you going to bribe him with?
How
are you going to corrupt him?
Yeah, the most corruptible, dangerous sovereign is the insecure sovereign.
Yeah, right.
The one who doesn't have absolute power, because then he's drawn to pursue absolute power. So I suppose you might say like the pursuit of absolute power corrupts. But I also wouldn't make that like an absolute rule either.
Tyler James says, Frank Herbert says power does not corrupt, but it attracts the corruptible. I think that's probably a better.
Yeah.
I like that. And I like Frank Herbert, so that's cool.
Yeah. Jason says modeling the prodigal son leads us to the catacon, I believe, working that one out at the moment. Yeah, that was my instinct on it as well. That there's this thing that restrains. What is that thing that restrains? And for now, I think plugging in the notion of the prodigal son as the antidote to the vengeful son, like that is the thing that restrains.
You know, interestingly, I believe it was Josephus who, keep in mind, was himself a Pharisee and a Jew. Well, okay, a Jewish Pharisee. Not a Christian, but commenting on the Christians having been around at that time. He was of the opinion that the destruction of Jerusalem in, what was it, like 70 or 74 AD, whatever it was a result of the martyrdom of St. James,
Interesting.
the Bishop of Jerusalem, who was regarded by everybody, Jew, Christian, pagan, it didn't matter, was all regarded as a very pious and holy man. And Josephus, who again, not a Christian, his theory, or at least his feelings about it was, once they threw him down off of the temple and stoned him to death, or however they killed him, that man was no longer there interceding on behalf of Jerusalem. So he was like the catacon that was keeping the judgment at bay. So what is the catacon? I was going to submit at least one option, and it's not like an either or thing, but the prayers of the saints.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it isn't. You can absolutely connect those. It doesn't have to be an either or. And you could say the liturgy. The liturgy is the catacon.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a bunch more stuff to get through here. I've passed the 2 hour mark, so we're going to keep pushing forward. Milo tweeted this out. I've not been surprised by anything in the last 10 years like I'm surprised by Ben Affleck being so intelligent and articulate. And even getting that introduction to it, I think you're probably still going to be surprised at this. Talking about AI.
I want to, as we kind of wrap up here, I do want to come back to AI. Jerry, you mentioned it, but Ben, how did earlier? You guys weren't here. We did a demonstration. My colleague Andrew Sorkin and I recreated ourselves and our voices. How do you see it? I mean, is it a benefit or is it a real threat? Is it possible that a Netflix could say, we're going to do our own, James Bond thing out there with a bunch of actors that are completely recreated for this market or that market?
A, that's not possible now. B, will it be possible in the future? Highly unlikely. C, movies will be one of the last things, if everything gets replaced, to be replaced by AI. AI can write you excellent imitative verse that sounds Elizabethan. It cannot write you Shakespeare. The function of having 2 actors or 3 or 4 actors in a room and the taste to discern and construct that is something that currently entirely eludes AI's capability, and I think will for a meaningful period of time. What AI is going to do is going to disintermediate the more laborious, less creative, and more costly aspects of filmmaking that will allow costs to be brought down, that will lower the barrier to entry, that will allow more voices to be heard, that will make it easier for the people who want to make goodwill on things to go out and make it. Look, AI is a craftsman at best. Craftsmen can learn to make stickly furniture by sitting down next to somebody and seeing what their technique is and imitating. That's how large video models, large language models basically work. A library of vectors of meaning and transformers that interpret the context, right? But they're just cross-pollinating things that exist. Nothing new is created.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. And really, in order to do that, look, craftsman is knowing how to work. Art is knowing when to stop. And I think knowing when to stop is going to be a very difficult thing for AI to learn because it's taste. And also, lack of consistency, lack of controls, lack of quality AI for this world of generative video is going to do key things more immediately. I wouldn't like to be in the visual effects business. They're in trouble because what costs a lot of money is now going to cost a lot less. And it's going to hammer that space, and it already is. And maybe it shouldn't take 1,000 people to render something, but it's not going to replace human beings making films. It may make your background more convincing. It can change the color of your shirt. It can fix mistakes that you've made. It can make it, you might be able to get 2 seasons of House of the Dragon in a year instead of 1. And if that happens, according to macroeconomics, in cultures where there are basically oligopolies competing, what should happen is with the same demand and the same spend is they should just make more shows, which should, you should have the same spend and now you can just watch more episodes. And eventually AI will allow you to ask for your own episode of Succession, where you could say, I'll pay $30, and can you make me a 45-minute episode where, like, Kendall gets the company and runs off and has an affair with Stewie? And it'll do it. And it'll be a little janky and a little bit weird, but it'll know their stats, it'll know those actors, and it will, remix it, in effect, and it will do that. That's the value, in my view, long-term of AI for consumers, which is eventually my hope for AI is that it's an additional revenue stream that can replace DVD, which took 15 to 20% out of the economy of filmmaking, which is, and there should be negotiated rights and digital rights to say, if you want to, what do people want to make? 5-minute, 30-second TikTok videos where they look like the Avengers. Well, great. You can, just like you used to be able to buy your Iron Man costume at the store, you're going to buy your Iron Man pack and you and your buddies are going to look like Iron Man and Hawkeye, like, on Twitch. That's what's going to really happen.
As Duffhead says, Affleck is shockingly coherent here. I was blown away.
I didn't know he had that in him.
Me neither. He's like, I'm gonna look at it. It makes me go back to all these memes of Affleck sitting there, like the tired Ben Affleck memes, where he's like smoking a cigarette and he's just like,
yeah.
Like, there's actually a brain behind those eyes. Yeah, he definitely looked like he was hopped up on something.
Didn't he like trans one of his kids or something?
I don't know. I haven't kept up on the life and times of Ben Affleck, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think that the point about AI not knowing when to stop, and that knowing when to stop is the matter of taste, it's a very insightful point. Related to this, Mark Andreessen highlighted this. Sunshine Vendetta on Twitter said, AI ain't taking everyone's jobs, let's be real. What it's actually doing is making the human touch worth its weight in gold. When a single prompt can spit out a track, live acts and real bands are going to hit harder than ever, trust me. As prompt-to-video tech blows up, live theater is about to flex its status-exclusive top-tier luxury vibes only. Jazz clubs, underground poetry readings, and the rise of live painting as full-blown performance art shows on a mainstream level. I can already picture schools bussing kids in just to catch a glimpse of real human creativity, raw and unfiltered, instead of homeworks, like watching a movie on Netflix or documentary. Human-made art's about to go premium, mega luxurious, almost untouchable.
Yeah,
Yes. Handwritten books, custom-made crafts, anything touched by human hands will be the new holy grail of pop culture. Give it a decade, even less, and that'll be the game. Just some thoughts running through my head today. Feels like today is the perfect time to create art. Start today.
Yeah, I remember when like a couple days ago you played that clip from one of the Gundo dudes who's making like the statues or whatever.
Yeah.
3D printed like marble statues for like really cheap so we can, populate cities with beautiful art and stuff. I remember when I first found out about that a number of months back on some Twitter post or whatever. And a lot of people in the comments were spurging out about that. And they're like, it's going to put all these artists out of work. They're not going to be able to compete. And like, no. What it's going to do is it's going to filter out all the shitty artists who should not be making art and who are making usually just garbage, if not like blasphemous, stupid, modern art. Yeah. Ugh. It'll make the people who are actually good at art, it'll make them way richer. There is still going to be a market for rich people who want handmade, handcrafted, like statues and stuff.
And it'll create new markets for people who figure out how to how'd you say this, like artify like different domains because of these increased tools at their disposal. So like people are already starting to figure out, well, how do you do uniquely AI style art? How do you master the prompts? How do you whatever. It's like a new domain for art that the artistic minded can go into, and they can generate even new different types of art. I've seen it described before as AI. What AI is going to do is effectively raise the lower bound of human IQ. That's effectively what it's going to do. On net, the revealed or performed IQ of humanity is going to go up because so many of the more remedial things are going to be automated, which is going to expand the creative capacity for humanity because they're not having to dedicate as much brain power to the remedial stuff, and they're able to create even more types of specialization and expand upwardly, vertically through those types of specialization.
Maybe. Like, okay, on one hand, I see what you're saying. I do think it will like create the possibility of hyper specialization and open up possibilities for creative endeavors or whatever. The idea that it's going to like lift IQs.
I'm not saying that it's going to make people's IQ go up. I'm saying that the demonstrated IQ of human activity on net is going to go up.
I was going to say it because, like, dude, I was an English major, and ever since having this thing, like, I can't fucking spell words anymore. I'm getting stupid. I compare myself to these Renaissance geniuses who, like, knew 20 languages and the entire Western canon. I'm retarded.
Right. Well, and so that's like the flip side. Like all of these things are always going to be true at the same time. It's also going to make people even more retarded. Because
yeah, right. Me.
Yeah, because like you're going to get like a top heaviness kind of here where people are going to get more and more sophisticated and able to perform with greater and greater complexity, but they're also going to be losing the lower end, which is, like you might have someone who's like an absolute brilliant coder who can code and develop an entire app in an afternoon, but he walks out his front door and he doesn't know which direction north is. Yeah, he can't drive to the store without Google Maps because he literally like doesn't have that space in his brain available anymore.
Yeah, I guess we'll always need people to like shovel shit at the zoo. So
yeah, right.
Well, I guess you could probably get one of these Elon bots to go do that now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Right.
So then what? Crime.
Yes. Yeah. Crime. Turn to crime.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one of our past episodes that we did when one of Trump's, like the story we talked about was one of Trump's court cases. And we titled it "Down on His Luck, Donald Trump Resorts to Crime."
Yeah, right. I remember suggesting that title to you.
Right. As soon as you said it, I was like, this is an all-timer.
Jason says there are lots of 90 to 100 IQ guys who are genius level mechanics, trades, etc. That's true. I work with people who, I deliver the steel to them at their machine shop or whatever that they have set up in their freaking garage with like a CNC machine and a vertical mill in the corner. And I just bring them a hunk of steel and they have to sign the paperwork. They can't write their names, but they can take this hunk of steel without a blueprint and they can make a fucking engine out of it or whatever. These guys are brilliant at that. What is that? How important is IQ to you, Matt? What do you think? We were kind of having this discussion yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and yet it's also not. Like,
right? Yeah.
Having a really high IQ can be a stumbling block as much as it can be a boon. Like it's a burden and a boon simultaneously. So I think it's, like you wouldn't get managerialism among a bunch of people with low IQs. They would just never. It's like the bell curve.
Yeah.
The high IQ and the low IQ people, like this is one area where they would diverge. Like you would never conceive of something with the elaborate complexity of managerialism if you were a low IQ person. You just just do thing. not like build out this super elaborate, dynamic, complex, like that's 100% the product of a high IQ minds. Like can like overly complexify everything way above what normal people can accommodate and work within. So I think it's like it just is. IQ just is.
Yeah,
and you want to have high IQ people and low IQ people, and I guess the midwits can stay around too.
And I find that, like, it does matter to some extent. Like, it's noticeable if you try to talk to somebody who is, like, a standard deviation below you. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a barrier there, where maybe they can keep up, but you got to kind of hold their hand a little bit. Talk to someone like 2 IQ, like, standard deviations below you, and it's, like, beyond just, like, pointing at things and saying tree or... Like, you know, you basically can't communicate about anything meaningful. At least that's what I found in my experience.
It's genuinely like low IQ people are quite literally closer to the earth.
Yes.
They're more grounded.
Yeah.
It's the high IQ people who think themselves in circles and drift away from reality, play in the fantasy land of their mind. The low IQ people are just kind of like grug, you know, like there's the grug meme is like an affectionate thing for a reason, because it's like there's something elegant about the simplicity of someone that's just normal, just down to earth, just relating, going through their normal tasks, not concerned with the deep philosophical complexities of life or you know, needing to obsessively track all the patterns or whatever. They're just like, I just live my life and have a good time and do my thing. That's why I persist with the slop. I'm always going to have the slop because I think the slop is like, it keeps you grounded.
There is something to be said about that. That's kind of why I like, despite the fact that I'm not particularly good at anything and I don't have a lot of skills beyond like, hey, I'm a little bright. I guess I got that going for me. And maybe it would be, I certainly don't think I'm meeting my potential in that regard by driving a semi-truck. However, I will say being around guys who work in machine shops and stuff does kind of help keep you grounded. You can't get lost just like up here in a abstraction, like in the play Roma with all the archons or whatever with the Platonic forms.
Yeah, right. This is funny. President Trump is requiring Zelensky to wear a coat and tie when he meets the president moving forward. I don't know if this is a real story. It's one of those recreational beliefs. I'm just going to choose to believe this is real because it's entirely believable. This is 100% believable that Trump's like, all right, enough of this fucking military fatigues bullshit. Like, show up in a suit and tie like a decent person. And it reminded me of a story that I heard recently about, I think it was one of Trump's, it was like his butler or something like that, who said that he is a stickler for people being on time and always being dressed to the nines. Those are like things that he has always insisted on of people around him. And if you notice, his team is always dressed to the nines. Everyone around them, they're always, I mean, it's part of the culture. They're just that way, just kind of in general. But the man is an aristocrat. He's like one of the clearest examples of an American aristocrat that we have. So this story is completely conceivable to me. Here's a really good, I want to share this video from Jeffrey Sachs talking about the buildup and development of everything between Ukraine and Russia and NATO. And this is a lead into the blog post that I'm going to read. This is going to be a very long episode because I've still got a pretty long blog post that I'm going to read, but it's going to be very much worthwhile.
I'm going to check out here in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So here's this video from Jeffrey Sachs.
This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification. basically ending World War II. And Gorbachev said that's very important. Yes, NATO doesn't move, and we agreed to German unification. The U.S. then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on basically a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power, and Clinton was the first agent of this. And the expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. At that point, Russia didn't much care. There was no border other than with the Königsberg, but other than that, there was no direct threat. Then the U.S. led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was bad, by the way, because that was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart.
You know, when all of that happened, it was like right at the cusp of my sort of becoming aware of the broader world. So I remember, you know, hearing about Bosnia and Belgrade, and I remember hearing about all that stuff, but not really having a context for it or understanding what was happening. And looking back on it now, yeah, that was insane. NATO bombing a European capital.
And
Literally just to break the country apart.
Yeah, Kosovo and all of that.
Yeah.
I think my father-in-law was stationed in Kosovo, which coincidentally is this kind of this pattern that emerges, like with the atomic bombs being dropped in World War II on like the two Christian cities in Japan. With Kosovo, that's kind of like that's like their Mount Athos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't it strange that every time the communists do something completely egregious, it just so happens to be focused on Christians?
The purpose of a system is what it does.
Russians didn't like that very much. But Putin became president, they swallowed it, they complained, but even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. Then 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. But then came two other decisive actions. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This was probably the most decisive event, never discussed in this context. But what it did was trigger the U.S. putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat. In 2004-5, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election and he became president, and in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. That calmed things down because the U.S. was pushing NATO, but the people of Ukraine on the opinion polls didn't even want to be in NATO. They knew that the country is divided between ethnic Ukrainian, ethnic Russian. What do we want with this? We want to stay away from your problems. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. A typical U.S. regime change operation, have no doubt about it. And the Russians did us a favor. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now, between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piot, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. They said, who's going to be the next government? All of this is to say, the U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. It's been, by the way, I forgot to mention, in 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. And then, okay, it's a long story, but the U.S. kept rejecting the basic idea, don't expand NATO to Russia's border in a context where we're putting in goddamn missile systems after breaking a treaty. 2019, we walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. On December 15th, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. You can find it online. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. I called the White House that next week after that, begging them, take the negotiations. Putin's offered something, avoid this war. Oh, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. Announce that NATO's not going to enlarge. Oh, don't worry, NATO's not going to enlarge. I said, oh, you're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you announce them? And he said, no, our policy is an open door. This is Jake Sullivan. Our policy is an open door policy. Open door for NATO enlargement. That is under the category of bullshit, by the way. You don't have your right to put your military bases anywhere you want and expect peace in this world. They turned down the negotiations. Then the special military operation started. And 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the United States and Britain said, no way. You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back as we kept pushing them into the front lines. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave.
Just pathological evil. Now, all of that is a setup for this. So this is from Alex Craner's Substack. The coming collapse of Britain. Everything points to a horrific cliff edge looming, an avalanche of debts, defaults, evictions, and unpaid bills to follow. This is from August 27, 2024 on Alex Craner's Substack. A series of bizarre developments that have unfolded in Great Britain over the last few weeks suggest that its financial system came to the verge of collapse, probably as a consequence of Ukraine's debt default. The last thing that people in power will tell us is the truth, but if we dig in dark places and connect the dots, I believe the conclusion practically makes itself. The consequences for Britain and probably for His Majesty's other dominions will be extreme. Let's dive in. Now, you notice actually I didn't. Maybe it changed. When I put the title in, I spelled it Ukraine, but I did capital U and capital K because it's become very clear that there's very little distance between the UK and Ukraine. The riots that weren't quite. The stabbings of 3 young girls, 6, 7, and 9 years of age, that happened in Southport, UK on 29 July, apparently unleashed widespread rioting and clashes in Britain, notably between the immigrant Muslim community and what PM Keir Starmer called right-wing thugs. The authorities' reaction has been nothing short of Orwellian, including a radical and ongoing crackdown on free speech. But it would appear that the riots and clashes haven't been quite as widespread nor as violent as the media portrayed them to be. In a recent podcast, Alexander McCurry pointed out that not only did everything seem calm in London, but that a number of his friends and acquaintances around the UK all told him the same, even for the cities where rioting had been reported. Could it be that the government overreacted and exaggerated the threat in order to justify stepping up its authoritarian control, which is now gripping Britain? Rather than appealing for calm, the government's messaging clearly aimed at intimidating the population. The UK's Home Office warned that actions have consequences and boasted that over 1,000 arrests have been made thus far. British courts already sentenced many people to stiff prison terms for wrongthink expressed on social media, and they made sure that these sentences got wide publicity. For a supposedly free society, recent statements by policymakers and public officials in the UK started to sound as though they came from the plot of the 2005 dystopian sci-fi film V for Vendetta. The media personalities, even after a lifetime of indoctrination with free speech as the core Western value, suddenly seem to have no qualms about advocating curbs on freedom of expression. On Friday, 16 August, I joined Tom Luongo at the Crypto Rich podcast to discuss the situation, which turned into a bit of a brainstorming session. Given that violent crime and knife stabbings are nothing new in Britain, they've been on the rise for years, and that people's resentment against immigrants isn't new either, it occurred to me to wonder, why is the government turning as radically authoritarian, and why now? If the crackdown is being deliberately orchestrated, and I believe that it is, then what is the reason for it? Our discussion converged on the idea that Britain might be facing an imminent financial crisis which could accelerate her economic and social collapse. My suspicion was that it might have to do with the fact that Britain got overextended in Ukraine trying to regain the leadership, affluence, and the prestige which it has been steadily losing over the recent decades. Britain's long descent. Indeed, Britain's decline has been long in the making. In October 2021, I published an article titled The Fall of Global Britain, an Investment Hypothesis, together with a video report with the same title. Noting that Great Britain is displaying many of the symptoms of imperial powers in decline, I predicted that it won't revert to simply minding its own domestic business as a neutral island nation. Here's what I wrote back then. Today, the UK could be in the early stages of the same sequence of events as all other imperial powers in decline. A severe crisis at home coupled with a dramatic loss of international leverage and a very costly addiction to imperial prestige. The UK will likely make all the mistakes made by other powers in that similar position through history. It will suffocate its domestic economic growth by imposing hard austerity at home, while at the same time increasing military spending and foreign adventurism. Britain's public debt will continue to outpace its GDP growth, and the government's budget deficits will be covered by Bank of England's monetary inflation. This recipe reliably leads to stagflation and possibly to hyperinflation. End quote. So far, so good. 3 years later, it is clear that the UK has continued making all the mistakes made by other decaying empires, particularly in terms of foreign adventurism. A sudden deterioration which developed during the course of this year seems to be related to the Western powers' impending military defeat in their proxy war against Russia. Britain has been the principal cheerleader and sponsor of that conflict, and she seems to have gone in over her head. In addition to providing at least £7.5 billion in military aid, nearly $10 billion, Britain gave another $5 billion or $6.5 billion to Ukraine in financial support. Furthermore, Britain has also guaranteed multiple tranches of World Bank loans to Ukraine, and many British financial institutions have purchased billions worth of Ukraine's bonds. Others made extensive direct investments there. In the timeline that follows, we'll trace the way Britain's perfect storm shaped up in Ukraine. Timeline of Ukraine's slow-motion train wreck. It's clear that 2024 wasn't going to be a good year for Ukraine. Public sentiment across Europe picked up on that, as confirmed in a poll of 17,023 respondents in 12 EU nations conducted in January by the European Council of Foreign Relations. It found that only 10% of the EU citizens believed that Ukraine could defeat Russia. Only 10%. A few weeks later, things got still more bleak after Russian forces captured the strategically important town of Avdiivka. But in addition to the near-certain military defeat, Ukraine was also facing a looming economic and financial collapse. Ukraine's economic performance was already dismal before the conflict with Russia started in February of 2022. But since that time, it has collapsed by another 25%. With tax receipts dwindling, Ukraine's 2024 budget deficit is expected to rise to nearly $44 billion. If Kiev were to service its debt obligations, they would eat up fully 15% of her GDP, the second largest expense item after defense, which stands at 31.3% of the GDP. Keeping Ukraine's government and military in operation has become entirely dependent on her Western backers. But by 2024, that support began to dry up as more and more decision makers started to doubt Ukraine's prospects. In late March 2024, while the $61 billion U.S. aid package was still stalled in U.S. Congress, the World Bank approved $1.5 billion in financial support for Ukraine. The draft document on the allocation of these funds underscored the catastrophic state of Ukraine's public finances and acknowledged the extremely high risk of cooperating with Ukraine. So they have documented on the record that Ukraine's public finances are in a catastrophic state, and there's an extremely high risk of cooperating with Ukraine. A World Bank official involved with the matter noted that Ukraine was facing bankruptcy. Significantly, he added that, as with previous transactions, the World Bank did not provide its own funds for Kiev, but once again took advantage of guarantees from two of Ukraine's donors, primarily Japan and the UK. Ukraine's Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, divulged that out of the $1.5 billion given to Ukraine, $984 million of the sum originated from Japan and $516 million from Britain. But Ukraine is now unable to service her mounting foreign debts. Sunday, May 4, 2024, bondholders pressure Ukraine. So keep track of these dates. He's going to go through a sequence of events here that are very clearly all connected. So this is Sunday, May 4. Bondholders pressure Ukraine. On May 4, the Wall Street Journal reported that a group of foreign bondholders, including such behemoths as BlackRock, PIMCO, and Francis Amundi, put pressure on the government of Ukraine to start repaying some of its debts. Back in July of 2022, this group granted Kiev a 2-year grace period to pause repayments of some $20 billion in bonds they'd previously issued. That agreement was due to expire on August 1, 2024. So they had a two-year grace period on pausing the repayments of this $20 billion in bonds. And this group of foreign bondholders are starting to put pressure on Ukraine to say, hey, you need to start paying on these. We can't keep floating them. That agreement was due to expire on August 1, 2024. According to the media reports, the interest payments on those debts alone would amount to $500 million annually. I'm not sure how they came up with that figure. The bond issues in question are all listed in this document, and the average interest rate on these bonds is about 7.54%, suggesting that Ukraine's annual interest expense was $1.487 billion, nearly triple what media reports suggested. And here we're still talking about only $20 billion out of Ukraine's total debt of $161.5 billion. Given the catastrophic state of the country's finances, the repayment of these debts would collapse Ukraine's government and its economy. Sunday, June 30th of 2024. So that was May 4. This is now June 30th. The Economist published an article titled, "Ukraine has a month to avoid default," or until the end of July 2024. Something had to be done. And in the conversation that Alex and Tom Luongo had about this immediately after it was published, which you should go look up, it's on the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast, Tom Luongo's podcast, and its date is, I believe, August 29th. It says, all fuses lead to London. In that, Craner described The Economist as what the Rothschild banks want you to think. So now, that was June 30th, so now 12 July. Negotiations with bondholders start. This is on a Friday. Private discussions began about restructuring Ukraine's debts with members of an ad hoc creditor committee. The discussions would conclude on July 19. The government of Ukraine was advised by Rothschild & Co. as financial advisors and White & Case LLP as legal advisors. Odd how the same names tend to crop up in the works wherever a land is drenched in blood. Odd indeed. Ukraine demanded a 60% debt reduction, while creditors thought that 22% was more reasonable. So now, Thursday, 18 July, Zelensky arrives in London. Zelensky arrived for an official visit to London. First, upon arrival, he met with General Valery Zaluzhny, former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine and recently appointed ambassador to Britain. So, he was commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now he's the ambassador to Britain. So his job is to intermediate between Ukraine and Britain. Later in the day, Zelensky participated at the European Political Community Summit held at the Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, along with delegates of 44 other countries. Speaking at the event, Zelensky underscored that the UK had been one step ahead in its determination to support Ukraine since the Russian invasion began. The summit concluded, apparently with the participants reaching an agreement to target Russia's shadow fleet of tankers, some 600 vessels enabling Russia to evade West's oil sanctions. On the sidelines of the summit, Zelensky also met with UK's King Charles III and Prime Minister Starmer. Allegedly, he also met with the representatives of some of Ukraine's financial and corporate backers like BlackRock, JP Morgan, Bridgewater, Blackstone, and ArcelorMittal. 19 July. So what was this? This was 18 July. So Friday. That was Thursday. On Friday, Zelensky addresses Starmer's cabinet. Zelensky paid an official visit to Prime Minister Starmer and on the occasion addressed the meeting of the British cabinet, which greeted Zelensky with a standing ovation. This was the first time another head of state has done so since 1997, when Bill Clinton addressed Tony Blair's cabinet. So you have the 1997 President of the United States versus the 2024 President of the Ukraine. In opening the meeting, Keir Starmer said that, quote, "Ukraine is and always will be at the heart of this government's agenda, and so it is only fitting that President Zelensky will make a historic address to my cabinet." Addressing Zelensky, Starmer said that, quote, "This is a very, very important meeting for us, and you're very welcome here. It is a real pleasure and a privilege to be able to welcome you to Downing Street this morning. This is a real piece of history," close quote. The invitation extended to Zelensky to speak to the British cabinet, Starmer continued, was indicative of the, quote, "esteem you're held in this country and around the world," end quote. Incidentally, this same Friday was also the last day of discussions about restructuring Ukraine's debts. So we can infer that those debts to private bondholders were among the very, very important matters discussed by the Starmer cabinet that day. That was Friday. Monday, 22 July. We have a deal. Almost as soon as Zelensky's visit in London concluded, the government of Ukraine announced that a deal was reached with its main bondholders to restructure the country's near $20 billion worth of bonds, including a 37% reduction of the amounts owed. But this was only, quote, "an agreement in principle reached with an, quote, ad hoc creditor committee, and it wasn't binding on all the bondholders." Instead, it imposed on Ukraine's government, quote, "the restructuring as soon as practicable to be implemented through a, quote, consent solicitation." In other words, Ukraine was expected to chase after its creditors and beg them to expect the deal, even offering them a 1.25% consent fee. Well, things were about to take a sharp turn for the worse. Wednesday, 24 July. Ukraine strikes the Fitch iceberg. Only 2 days after Ukraine announced the deal with their bondholders, Fitch downgraded Ukraine's credit rating from CC to C, reflecting extreme credit risk reserved for countries that, quote, "entered default or default-like process." Significantly, Fitch made it explicit that the publication of sovereign reviews is subject to restrictions and must take place according to a published schedule. For Ukraine, the next scheduled review date was set for 6 December. However, Fitch determined that there was a, quote, material change in the creditworthiness of the issuer, which would have made it, quote, inappropriate for us to wait. Thus, Fitch brought forward their credit rating review for Ukraine by nearly 6 months. 6 months, either because her financial position suddenly and significantly deteriorated, or because somewhere, someone who had the power to pull strings decided to capsize Ukraine and the UK and EU along with it. Now, 29 July, stabbings in Southport. The stabbing of 3 young girls took place in Southport, UK. The event reportedly unleashed widespread rioting and clashes around Britain. End of July was also the time when The Economist predicted Ukraine would face bankruptcy. Wednesday, 31 July, Zelensky temporarily suspends debt repayments. Zelensky signed a law enabling Ukraine to suspend payments of external debts for 2 months or longer. So, they just defaulted. Ukraine just straight up defaulted. And it was because Fitch downgraded their credit rating. Inexplicably, all of a sudden, right when they're in the middle of this bind. This is Wall Street striking back. Thursday, August 1, debt repayments freeze takes effect. Bondholders' grace period expires. Zelensky's unilateral debt repayments freeze takes effect. So the bondholders are getting fucked here. Then, August 6th, Ukraine launches Kursk incursion. Ukraine launched a surprise incursion into the Kursk region of Russia. The plan to attack the Kursk region had been made at least a year earlier, but it was never implemented, most likely because strategically it made little sense. In fact, Professor John Mearsheimer called the attack a fiasco. Here's a part of his statement. Quote, I think it was a huge mistake on the part of the Ukrainians to invade Russia. It's going to speed up their defeat. It's a giant killing zone. The Ukrainians cobbled together a strike force that's comprised of some of their most formidable fighting forces. That strike force went on the offensive. You're presenting the other side with a huge number of targets. The Ukrainians have been losing twice as many armored vehicles on a daily basis than they were in the war before August 6th. I think it was a remarkably foolish thing to do. It's hard to believe that to make the Kursk offensive work, the Ukrainians had to pull forces off the Eastern Front where this war is being settled and where they're in deep trouble. And to pull forces away, it's not only that they didn't send reinforcements to the Eastern Front, they pulled forces away from the Eastern Front. It's quite clear that the Russians are doing better by the day because Ukrainian resistance is weakening by the day. Because Ukrainians have funneled and are funneling forces away from the Eastern Front and into the Kursk region. This, in my opinion, is remarkably foolish. End quote. Noting that the Russians were taken surprise at Kursk, the professor thought they were unprepared because, quote, it's such a crazy idea that the Russians didn't think that the Ukrainians would be foolish enough to do it. If Professor Mearsheimer is right, this raises an important question. Why did the armed forces of Ukraine pull the trigger now, as the country was already on the verge of military defeat and financial default? What we do know is that Ukraine launched the incursion only 18 days after Zelensky's visit in London. Zelensky's security advisor, Mikhailo Podolyak, admitted that the Kursk invasion was discussed with the British. On August 18, the Sunday Times of London revealed that Britain played the pivotal role in the operation, quoting, unseen by the world, British equipment, including drones, have played a central role in Ukraine's new offensive, and British personnel have been closely advising the Ukrainian military on a scale matched by no other country. Zero Hedge commented that the operation was, quote, a British plan with British weapons. The leadership of Ukraine gave at least 3 unconvincing explanations for the incursion. 1, to improve Ukraine's negotiating position vis-a-vis Russia. 2, to divert Russian forces from the Donbass front. And 3, to create a buffer zone inside Russia. Neither explanation made much sense, but the move did create a window of opportunity for the West to talk up Ukraine's great military success, which could prove to be a turning point in the war. Wasting no time on that same Tuesday, 6 August, the European Council approved 4.2 billion euros in financial support for Ukraine. It would be the first regular payment out of the 50 billion euros financial aid package set aside for Ukraine by the European Union. The European Council's decision to approve the funds was based on the EU Commission's assessment that Ukraine had satisfactorily fulfilled 9 reform indicators related to the first regular quarterly payment. These conditions included the government's public financial management, management of state-owned companies, business environment, and energy and mine clearance. So remember, back up here, Where was it? Where they said, shut up. I can't remember exactly. Oh, right here. The draft document from the World Bank, the draft document on the allocation of these funds underscored the catastrophic state of Ukraine's public finances and acknowledged the extremely high risk of cooperating with Ukraine. So this was in March. So then coming back down here, the European Council's decision to approve the funds was based on the EU Commission's assessment that Ukraine had satisfactorily fulfilled 9 reform indicators related to the first regular quarterly payment, which included the government's public financial management, management of state-owned companies, business environment, and energy and mine clearance. So between March and, what was this, August? Yeah, March and August, Ukraine completely defaulted on their bondholders, and then the European Council released this money on the basis of the improvements that they've made. It was unclear, however, whether the European Commission was equally impressed by Ukraine's credit rating downgrade and the government's suspension of external debt repayments. But what is important is that somehow the decision was made and the money was transferred to Ukraine without undue delay. Tuesday, 13 August, Ukraine receives EU funds. The European Commission transferred 4.2 billion euros to Ukraine as part of the first tranche of the Ukraine Facility Program. Wednesday, 14 August, the WHO declares the monkeypox pandemic. In addition to all of this, on 14 August, the World Health Organization Director General declared monkeypox outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. We're all in this together, again, and now further restrictions on public gatherings and freedom of expression might be justified. Another 2 events coincided with Ukraine's de facto debt default. On 30 July, Israelis assassinated senior Hezbollah commander Fuad Shakur and an Iranian military advisor Milad Bedi in Lebanon, along with 5 Lebanese civilians, including 2 children. The following day, on 31 July, they also assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, in Tehran. We can't be sure whether all these events are related, but they do have this in common. They all had the potential to precipitate worldwide states of emergency, either due to escalation of military conflicts or due to a pandemic. And they all took place within days from Ukraine's default, which has put the Western financial system in jeopardy. Further signs of panic in the banking circles come from the mothership itself. Panic at the Bank of England? On 22 July, the same day when the agreement between the government of Ukraine and the Ad Hoc Committee for Private Creditors was announced, the Bank of England also announced a seminar titled The Future Bank of England Balance Sheet, managing its transition towards a new system for supplying reserves. The seminar took place the same day, a bit of a short notice for most people, and featured a speech by Victoria Saporta, executive director of the bank's markets directorate. In the announcement, the Bank of England explained that its balance sheet plays a key role in helping the bank achieve its financial stability and monetary policy objectives. Saporta's speech, titled Let's Get Ready to Repo, laid out the bank's latest thinking on the future of its balance sheet, which would transition toward a demand-driven system for supplying reserves. Saporta suggested that the bank would need to accept a broader range of assets as collateral to make the system usable for the widest range of firm business models. She added that the single punchline is that both we, the bank, and you, the market, need to prepare ourselves for increased usage of both our short-term and long-term repo operations. Or in short, let's get ready to repo. Here's how Bloomberg's macro strategist Simon White put it. In a demand-led system, quote, what banks use to settle balances each day must be shiftable onto the central bank's balance sheet in a crisis. If they are not, liquidity is at risk of seizing up altogether. Thus, in a crisis, potentially no asset under this scheme will be turned away. That could include even Ukraine's bonds. So all of those bondholders who are getting stiffed, they're going to be able to exchange their bonds with the Bank of England for British pounds. They're worthless Ukrainian bonds. What is clear from this and from the BOE's language is that the bank is now anxious about Britain's financial system collapsing, and it has resolved to avert the collapse in the worst possible way by loosening its credit standards and accepting junk quality collateral in exchange for cash. This is the clearest possible sign that the system came to the verge of collapsing. Not so long ago, we had a glimpse of just how fragile Britain's financial system is. Kwarteng's mini budget was a foreshadowing. On Friday, 23 September 2022, shortly after the new cabinet led by Prime Minister Liz Truss took over, her Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, presented his mini budget. The markets did not react well, and both the British pound and the price of gilts sold off sharply. Gilts are British government bonds. This in turn caused thousands of British pension funds to face margin calls. To come up with cash for those margin calls, the pension funds needed to urgently liquidate some of their gilt holdings. However, by Tuesday, 27 September, there were no buyers for long-dated gilts. To avert a price collapse, the Bank of England had to intervene. As the bank subsequently informed the Parliament in a letter dated 5 October, on September 27 and 28, the system had come within hours of collapsing. The bank came through as the buyer of up to £40 billion in gilts. What's peculiar about the British financial system is that the taxpayers are obliged to reimburse the Bank of England for any losses it sustains on its balance sheet assets. If the price of gilts on the bank's balance sheet collapses, British taxpayers must cover those losses and make the bank whole. So what kind of money are we talking about? As the FT reported, the Financial Times reported last July, the BOE has estimated it will require the Treasury to transfer a total of £150 billion by 2033 to cover expected losses on the central bank's quantitative easing program. Stand and deliver. So how much is £150 billion? Provided that things haven't deteriorated since July 2023, they have, we're talking £2,200 per man, woman, and child in Britain. Stand and deliver. That's the ransom that the BOE is claiming from them. But given the British workforce is only about half the population, and that private enterprise accounts for less than 55% of the British GDP, this sum represents nearly £10,000 per employee working in the private sector. In all, the situation is impossible, and all the cabinet reshuffles and cosmetic patches changed nothing of substance in the UK. They amounted to a sort of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as the ship is already sinking. So where is all this headed? Let's have a peek at the economic and social conditions in the UK to consider the possible outcomes of the crisis. The dying economy. In addition to making heavy direct investment in the Project Ukraine, Britain has sustained high indirect costs as a consequence of sanctions imposed on Russia. Today, large segments of British society are slumping into Dickensian-era poverty. According to last year's figures from Trussell Trust, the number of people in the UK who needed emergency food supplies from food banks more than doubled in the last 5 years to 3 million people. 1 in 5 households have trouble paying their water bills, and many more are struggling to keep up with their energy bills. Electricity bills in the UK are over 5 times higher than the European average and will substantially increase this winter again, as the supplier's wholesale costs increased by 20% over the last few months. It's little wonder that as many as 48% of Britons said they would have to turn down the heat or switch it off completely to survive the winter financially. In February this year, The Guardian published an article titled "Gordon Brown Slams Obscene Levels of Destitution in the UK." Its opening paragraph states that, quote, Britain is in the throes of a hidden poverty epidemic, with the worst affected households living in squalor and going without food, heating, and everyday basics such as clean clothes and toothpaste, end quote. The Guardian also published a column written by Brown himself titled, quote, Tables without food, bedrooms without beds. Grinding child poverty in Britain calls for anger and a plan. Brown lamented that in some neighborhoods of his own hometown of Kirkcaldy, 70% of children were in poverty, which is the worst he had ever seen in his life. He described Britain as being, quote, haunted by poverty we thought had been consigned to history. Indeed, as The Guardian put it last year, quote, everything points to a horrific cliff edge looming and an avalanche of debts, defaults, evictions, and unpaid bills to follow. Put simply, frighteningly large numbers of people just don't have enough money to absorb the shocks that are coming. Wages are too low, benefits too mean, and the cost of living too high for them to afford even the basics. The CEO of one British retailer complained that his stores were losing customers to food banks or simply to hunger, end quote. Yes. Kai says, so this is why they're taxing the farmers so they can steal and sell off their land. Exactly. It's the kulaks. The parasite is killing the host. When businesses are losing sales to poverty rather than competition, we know that the parasite is killing the host. The parasite, of course, is the banking cartel, and it doesn't care about the plight of the ordinary British people. In an interview last year, Bank of England's top economist, Hugh Pill, thought that the best advice he could offer to his fellow Britons was to just accept being worse off. He literally said that, quote, somehow in the UK, someone needs to accept that they're worse off and stop trying to maintain their real spending power by bidding up prices, end quote. Parroting the same mindset, the bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, admonished British workers not to demand pay raises in order to do their part in the fight against inflation. None of this is accidental. It's not like Britain has been cursed with the bad luck of having consistently incapable or uncaring governments. Rather, the policy of immiserating the British people has been sustained and deliberate. According to a report written in 2018 by Professor Philip Alston, UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, a, quote, systematic, willful, concerted, and brutal economic war, end quote, was being waged against the poor and vulnerable sections of British society. Since then, things have only gotten a whole lot worse. For British families, quote, 2024 was shaping up to be financially the worst year in living memory. Now, if these policies were deliberate, then what is their objective? Well, Gordon Brown did spell it out in his February op-ed. He called on the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who had then replaced Kwarteng, to, quote, undertake a root and branch review of universal credit. But the universal credit Brown was mentioning is merely the lure. The actual bill of goods that Brown was selling as a feigned outrage over poverty he himself helped create was forcing a neo-feudal subjugation on British citizens by making them dependent on the nanny state for handouts. This is why his partner in crime, Tony Blair, has been pushing so hard to introduce a digital ID in the UK. It will be needed to police British people's obedience and compliance with whatever rules, norms, or restrictions that the ruling establishment might demand. It could be vaccinations, confinement to 15-minute cities, carbon quotas, death panels, insect protein fodder, love for the big brother, military conscription, forever wars, etc. Now that their ship has sunk in Ukraine and in the Middle East, they need these measures in place yesterday. Note that all of these things, all of these issues, isn't it strange that these are key issues in the UK, and somehow they're also things that we've been experiencing to a lesser degree here in the United States? It's almost like it's been exported to us. This is not progress toward greater prosperity and freedom, but rather a future that George Orwell described as, quote, a boot stamping on the human face forever. Britain's not-so-excellent misadventure in Ukraine tore the last shiny fragment from her democratic facade, revealing her feudalistic authoritarian rule by an unelected, unaccountable, and depraved oligarchy. History suggests that such regimes ossify and have a certain tendency to drag their host nations into dark ages, where they may remain mired in backwardness for generations. It remains to be seen whether the British people will find the strength and determination to fight back and win a better future for the coming generations. I sincerely hope that they will fight back. The same fight is gathering for all of us in the Western world. In my next report, I'll address the changes that will likely impact the financial markets in Britain and her dependencies like Australia and Canada. As the empire unravels, good riddance, it will create opportunities for major windfalls, possibly one of those rare occasions worth paying attention to. In concluding, I'll only foreshadow what I believe is possible by presenting the chart of the German imperial bond at the turn of the 19th century. He says, you are here. Current British circumstances are in many ways similar to those faced by the Weimar Republic a century ago, suggesting that it might travel along a similar trajectory to a similar end. Yes, that was Alex Craner. It's brutal. It's brutally dark. And I strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, go listen to the podcast episode that Alex and Tom Luongo recorded right after he published this back on August, I think it was August 29th. That's it's a must listen. And then you need to listen to the conversation that Jason, Miranchuk now, that Jason had with Tom Luongo. Jason, I know you're in the chat right now. Where do people go to get the your conversation with Luongo, or is it available for people to go get yet? We're going to have a lot more on these issues over the next few weeks. Jason and I have some conversations we need to line up. We should probably do one with Pete as well. I've just been thinking that a Jason, Pete, and Matt conversation would be a fun one. Because all of this that's happening over there, like the chickens are coming home to roost, but it's also been pushed along by characters within the United States. And this is part of the significance of the Trump administration coming in when it is. And the radical moves that the Trump administration wants to make are basically all revolving around ensuring that when that whole shit show tumbles off a cliff, the United States doesn't go with him. We're insulating ourselves from, it's like the British Empire finally breaking up and completely falling apart as the mother country caves into a sinkhole that it dug for itself. And America is the best positioned colony to actually finally take control of its own destiny. And we happen to be uniquely positioned to be able to do that. And all of our politics are aligning around that idea now. So it's going to be rough here. It's something, a sovereign debt collapse that ripples all throughout Europe is not going to not be felt here. But it's going to be better here than just about anywhere else. And it's going to open up a lot of very good opportunities. Tales of the Shadow Empire on Gumroad is the place to go. Jason will be putting out clips of the Tom Talk over the next few days. So go to Tales of the Shadow Empire on Gumroad and sign up there, and you'll get access to the conversation he just had with Tom Luongo, laying out the American influences and the role that they've been playing in beginning to detach America from this total European tire fire. Okay. Couple last little clips here, and we'll get out of here. Some sobering stuff to leave you with. This is from Jonathan Pajot. Christ didn't come just to remove suffering.
When Christ came, he didn't completely come to remove suffering. In some instances, he did remove suffering, but he seems to point to the fact that the highest thing you can do is actually suffer for the right reason. That if you suffer for a purpose, that suffering actually ceases to be suffering in the way that we understand it.
Right.
And that's something that you
You've
see.
described that as glory. I think.
Exactly.
If you go to a movie and you watch your favorite secret agent operating, it's not like he isn't carrying a burden. No burden, no adventure.
That's right.
No adventure, no meaning.
Those types of stories, they become extreme sometimes in the Christian story, but you can kind of understand them. The martyr, right? The person who's willing to die without compromising their highest aim. Most of us are not called to do that, but that becomes an image of what we're supposed to do at a small level, right? It's like I am called to sacrifice my immediate pleasures or my life in the smallest way, you know, maintain my highest, and then I will gain my life. Even if I lose it for all, it looks like I'm losing it for the outside world. Like I'm not getting all the advantages that you could think, but because I am oriented properly, that's what, like being a father, that's what a father is.
Yes. The art of suffering without despair. And this is what it looks like. This is what suffering looks like. That dude is a unit. Shout out to him. Hopefully that's motivational to someone out there. And I will leave you, before Hulk, I'll leave you with this. Appalachian folk singing.
In that merry month of May, when the green leaves they were swelling, that William Green on his deathbed lay for the love of Barbary Island. He sent his men into the town, to the place where she was dwelling. Said William's sick and he sends for you, if your name be Barbary Island. As she was going o'er the hill, she heard that died for me today. I'll die for him tomorrow.
That was amazing. So beautiful. Your voice is so unique.
It's mountain music. I love it.
I love America, man. Appreciate you guys showing up today. It's been another great episode of the Astrolabe. Do me a favor and hit the like button. We're at 118. Still got 141 watching. Thank you guys for being so diligent with the like button. The super chats. Got some good super chats today. I appreciate you guys. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Astrolabe. Do me a favor on your way out, hit the like button, subscribe, and then share the show with someone. Someone you think would enjoy it. And go join the Kingpill Discord, kingpill.com. It's a place to be. You're missing out if you're not there. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. And I give you Hulk.
They're my hero. And they tried to kill the next president of the United States. Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania